All right. Good afternoon and welcome to the meeting of the Okaloosa County Board of Commissioners. Today is Tuesday, September 3rd. And it's just after 3. We'll begin today with the call to order, an invocation by Mayor Witten, City of Crestview, then by the Pledge of Allegiance with the Baker Jr. ROTC Honor Guard. If you would, please stand with us.
If you all would please join me in prayer. Lord, as we gather here today, this august body makes decisions, we always ask for your guidance to make sure the decisions being made are in your will, not in our will, for the good of the country, good for the county, good for all our cities. We ask you to bless all people gathered here today, and if they approach the council, to do so in a wise fashion. As always, we ask you this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
You may be seated. Thank you, Mayor Witten, and thank you to the Junior ROTC from Baker. Mr. Hofstad, County Administrator's update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Just very briefly, I wanted to, for the board's sake, as it relates to this agenda, item 8B is the acquisition of the SS United States. We've hit a wrinkle with the peer operators for that item, and we would ask that that item be pushed 2 weeks until the next meeting to allow us time to work out the issues with HB. That's an item under Jennifer under TDD. So that's all I have.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So push it 2 weeks. Thank you. Ms. Hoshihara.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no updates today.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one thing today. For the last couple of years, we have, in conjunction with our external auditors, worked with them to have a annual kickoff meeting for the coming year's audit. It seems like we just got done with last year's audit. And we're looking forward to next year's audit at the end of the year. But this kickoff meeting brings together the finance teams and administrators from all the different county departments, as well as the constitutionals. That has proven to be very successful in how smooth the audits go. And I want to thank the county departments for their interest and for their engagement in that plan. That is this coming Thursday at 1:30 down at Warren Everett for anybody that of the commission that chooses to want to go and talk about the finances. But I certainly appreciate the constitutionals and all the finance members of your team that participate in that. It makes a much smoother audit process. That's all I've got, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you. At this time, we'll open for public comment. I have 2 speaker cards for public comment. Just as a reminder, please come to them and 4 speaker cards. Yes? Okay, no worries. Thank you. Okay, thank you. 4 speaker cards. If anyone else is desiring to speak, please see Mr. Tomacek in the back and fill out the appropriate form. You'll have up to 3 minutes to discuss any topic or to present any topic. Mr. Brian Hornberg. Please push the speak button.
Can you hear me now?
Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon. My name is Brian Hornberg, and I wanted to talk to you about the developments proposed on Buckward Road, Buckhaven namely, which is a 132 lot residential neighborhood in the middle of the agricultural zoned land district for Okaloosa County. And I wanted to remind you all that it is your statutory responsibility to enforce the comprehensive plan and the land development code, both. And in my view and the view of the residents on that street on Buckward Road, it does not meet either. But in the comprehensive plan regarding that, in the Florida State Statute 163.1.3177, future land use element of the comprehensive plan, that element, it lays out the approximate acreage and the intent, and the element shall establish the long-term end toward which the land use programs and activities are ultimately directed. And part of the reason for that is to protect the land according to the intent and to discourage urban sprawl. And when we look at the actual intent in the comp plan under agriculture, it says the purpose is to provide for the production of plants and animals useful to humans, including to a variable extent, the preparation of plant and animal products for human use, for sale or otherwise. And this category is also suitable for preservation of green spaces, conservation uses, outdoor recreation, and public and institutional uses. But residential neighborhoods is not the intent of the agricultural zone. And if you go to the actual density allowed, it says in our comp plan, the lands designated ag should generally be at least 10 acres in size. And this neighborhood has made an exception, which we don't believe the comp plan allows for. And it makes an exception down to 1 acre lots, and then a further exception down to 1/3 acre lots, and then does that for 132 homes in one neighborhood in the ag zone. That is not the intent of the ag zone. And it is you all's responsibility to enforce that, That's our representatives to do that. There's a case, just as a reference, from the Florida Assistant State Attorney General from 1998, where a municipality was asking about, could they approve something that agreed with the zoning but didn't agree with the comp plan? And this is what that says. This language clearly provides the legislative intent that all development, including the construction and building permits and anything undertaken subsequent to the adoption of the comp plan, must be in accordance with the land use element of the plan. To interpret it otherwise would be to fly in the face of clearly expressed legislative intent and would undermine one of the primary objectives of the act, which is to protect human, environmental, social, and economic resources. And I just want to end with one quote, is we got to protect this ag land. It is important. I know we want to develop economically, but we have to protect our agricultural land. And if we set a precedent like this, it will continue to be repeated. And I quote from a book I just read about civilizations and things that cause civilizations to fall. And one of them, surprisingly, from a book written back in 1954, was the ruin of agriculture through the exploitation of the country by the town, resulting in a precarious dependence on foreign food supplies. And I think we need to keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Just to remind you all, we will be sticking with the 3 minutes as we have quite a robust agenda today. And we have a budget meeting at the 5 o'clock hour. Next, we'll have Mr. Robert Sugg.
Commissioners, thank you. My name is Chaplain Rob Sugg. I live at 4164 Big Buck Trail in Crestview. I am following up on an email that I sent on 19 August to 12 of our elected officials. I received 2 acknowledgements. Thank you, Mayor Whitten. Appreciate that. And in case it escaped anybody's attention, I'd like to read that email now for you. Appreciate that. Ladies and gentlemen, commissioners, counselors, Mr. Mayor, and Sheriff Aiden. I am Chaplain Rob Sugg, U.S. Air Force retired, a resident of Crestview and Okaloosa County. I'm an active Presbyterian minister. I'm also a full-time researcher and publisher focusing on our global, national, and regional threats to our republic. I do have a blog. I have 3,500 hits every month. While most of Americans have been asleep, our globalists, the Chinese Communist Party, and our CIA have been plotting a color revolution against the United States, as well as the rest of the Western world. The Marxists are stepping out, and they have no intentions of stopping. A color revolution gathers numerous disenfranchised, useful idiots movements under one umbrella. The individuals are utilized as sand in the machine. Over the next 2 months, Marxists will take root in every critical office and on every critical roadway and bridge on which city, county, and state leaders allow. They will grind down every business, every food establishment, and every government service until everything comes to a halt. Marxists will demand concessions, and the moment we do, we will lose our nation. They are beginning in our large cities, and the effects will strangle our nation, and I'm gathering this is going to begin in earnest the first week of October. Marxists will target transportation, power, water, food, and medical care. Color revolutions are a form of lawfare. The trespassers pit the threat of civil lawsuits against the free movement and services to the public. They bring their own photographers, they bring their own media outlets in order to paint law enforcement as an infringement on their civil liberties. If you move them, they cry civil liberty. If you shut down, if you don't move them, they will destroy you. I believe the biggest threats to Okaloosa County will be the shutdown of interstate and transportation goods. In all cases, have we prepared our city and county attorneys for this? Have we prepared for a blockade of food and medications? In the very real case of a politically hijacked electrical grid, how would we respond? Air conditioning? How about a blockade of medical equipment and medications, or a case of municipal water shutdown? Does the city and county have sufficient fuel and propane and LNG to outlast a 2-month siege?
Thank you, Chaplain. Thank you for that time. If you send it by email, I'm sure that you'll be responded to as appropriate.
Thank you, sir. And if you would all kindly dig out the email that I just read on August 19th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next will be Miss Lisa Ward.
Hi, good afternoon. So this is the first time that I've been to one of these meetings, so it's a little intimidating. We were part of a group of people, citizens that came together and filed petitions against the 2 subdivisions coming to Buck Ward Road. One of the properties has actually been in my family for generations, which will be now Buckhaven for part of it. I could talk about the deficiencies in roads. I know that there was an article 2 years ago where our vice chairman said that the roads, if we fix them, they'll drive faster. But I'd like the roads fixed, things like that before we move in 300 more homes to our neighborhood. The north end of the county, I could talk about the lack of mental health services. There's no crisis stabilization unit. There's not even a receiving facility on this end of the county to accept people who are in a mental health crisis. But actually what I'm here today to speak to is the accountability and transparency of our local government. One of the things that we found at the meeting on August 8th of the Planning Committee is that there was a clear commission of an ethics violation by the chairman of the committee. He, during the meeting, actually admitted that the Baker School entrance would no longer be an issue for the Arbor Grove subdivision because he sold himself land to the school board to create a new entrance. That made a profit for something that he was presiding over. And once asked to recuse himself, and actually I objected to him testifying because we didn't bring him as a witness, he did not recuse himself. Again, even though there's a clear personal relationship with the developer, and a lot of the decisions were made favorable to the developer. There was clear ex parte communication. They ignored another person bringing the fact that the people who owned Arbor Grove were working under a not licensed inactive business, and that was still let go. There was a lot of things that if there was an investigation, this committee would probably look at it and see that there was problems with that. I would request a new hearing for us petitioners. There was one nay vote, and if he had abstained, there might have been a little bit more clear transparency. But he was the chairman and he led the hearing that we were supposed to use as our rights. And that did not happen. I really appreciate your time, and this will
Ms. Ward,
probably.
I will follow up on one thing. Florida has a commission on ethics. And I would hope to coordinate you with them if there's an issue, because then they would definitely be able to put the adequate time into it. And that's the appropriate authority. to be able to
And
look at
the
it.
committee
So what
is
I'm going to
approved by
do-
you guys, right?
Yes, but
okay.
the claim that you're making would be with the Division of Ethics, which is a state department. So what I'm going to do is give your information to Ms. Hoshihara, County Attorney. She's going
Okay.
to follow up with you and give you some guidance in that
Okay.
route.
And also the attorney that worked at that meeting allowed us to be threatened at the mediation by the lawyer for the other side
Okay.
and didn't intervene. So that was another issue at the mediation.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Gerald Hollingsworth. Dr. Hollingsworth.
I'd like to thank the commissioners for giving me time to talk for a minute. And I won't be here long. My attorney is going to take most of the time. 20 years ago, I had an aircraft hangar and an airplane that I operated from Ruckle Field in Niceville. At that time, Dave Miner approached me. He was with the airport authority, and he said they were planning to develop Crestview Airport, and he enticed me to come to Crestview and build a hangar. And he presented me, or they presented me, with a lease for 20 years with an open end to renew every 20 years if I so desired and if I met the terms of the lease. So I did come to Crestview and signed the lease and built a very expensive hangar. And now the airport authority is attempting to change the terms of the lease agreement so that I only will have one more renewal of that lease. And I don't think that one party in a two-party agreement can change anything unless both parties agree. So that's my position. And thank you for allowing me to speak, and thank you for your service.
Scott Work.
yes.
Nick, if you'll restart the time, so Mr. Work will have his adequate time as a second speaker.
Okay.
Well, thank you for allowing us to speak today. My name is Scott Work. I'm a local attorney in Destin, Florida. I represent Gerald Hollingsworth. Dr. Hollingsworth's probably a little bit too, didn't like to brag on himself, I'll say that. But Dr. Hollingsworth moved to the area in the 1950s, and he started a Toyota dealership, the BMW dealership, and the Mercedes dealership here, I believe in the 60s or 70s, and he owned them for decades until recently. So he's been a pillar of this community for over 70 years. Like he said, he had an airport hangar at Ruckle. He was offered to come sign a lease with the county 20 years ago at Crestview, build a hangar, and he was given a lease that showed, and we believe the plain language of the lease shows that he's entitled to multiple renewals. He signed the lease. We're now 20 years later, and the airport staff is interpreting that same lease to say that he's only entitled to one renewal. And not only interpreting it to say that there are only one renewal available, but also asking him to sign documents which limit the number of future renewals to the current to one renewal. As Dr. Hollingsworth already said, we all know that if it's a two-party contract, one party can't amend the lease without the other party's consent. We believe that that's what airport staff is attempting to do. As an example, in 2017, they wished to amend Section 11 of the lease. They sent him an amendment. He signed it. Section 7's amended. Today, they send him when he exercises his renewal option, they say, well, you also got to agree that there's only one more renewal available. And that's what he doesn't agree with. You'll see later on the consent agenda that his renewal is up for one of the issues for your consideration today. I don't think any of the parties, the county or Dr. Hollingsworth, disagree that he's entitled to this first renewal. Our disagreement is over whether he's entitled to future renewals. Again, you can read the plain language of the lease, the renewal option. It says very clearly that he has the option to renew the lease every 20 years on the same terms and conditions, except the rent amount. And when he was up for renewal, the county recalculated the rent. He agreed. And so all the other terms and the conditions of the lease should still apply, including his right to a future renewal. Dr. Hollingsworth, as he stated, he built a hangar and other valuable improvements on the property. County now trying to limit the number of renewals, significantly lowers the value of the improvements that he made. My time is over. We hope to resolve this issue with the county and that we're not forced to go the legal route, because I don't think not what Dr. Hollingsworth wants, and we assume that's not what the county wants as well. Thanks for your time.
Sir, thank you. Commissioner Wills?
Yeah, if I may, hey, if you don't mind, Mr. Work, good to see you again.
Yes, nice to see you too, Nathan. It's been a while.
Hollingsworth, appreciate your generosity through the years to the community. I certainly, want to be a fair partner here and make sure our airports department's not getting it wrong. I do have the lease in front of me. They were kind enough to share that. Scott, could you point me to that plain language you're talking about?
Yes, sir. It's page 8, section 30A, option term.
You want to read that to us, or?
I've got copies here if I can hand them out, highlighted.
I'm just looking for the plain language about the multiple terms. The word I'm seeing is term singular, and I was just looking for the plain language you were talking about.
This is the plain language we were talking about.
Okay.
Yes, the section 30A, correct.
That says for additional term singular of 20 years.
It does say an additional term singular of 20 years.
Okay,
That's correct.
And then that next page, I think, was with regard to the rent, it says the option to renew singular. So I want to be fair, but I'm not able to obligate the county to a perpetual lease of public property if the plain language, which of course none of us were involved in. I think literally no one on this dais would have been involved in 20 years ago.
Right,
so we
right.
can't take ownership of what the intent was at the time. All I can do is look at the contract and go, we want to respect and appreciate Doc Hollingsworth, but happy to give him his 20-year option here today. But I'm not able to divine out of this, even kind of, turning my head to the right and squinting one eye. I'm not able to see the plain language with multiple terms. So I appreciate it. I'll be happy to vote in support. If you'd like to ask us to pull it, certainly we can pull it, I suppose. But I wouldn't be able to take action to contravene what I think is staff's reasonable interpretation of a singular renewal term.
Well, I think that everybody agrees he's entitled to this first renewal, because this is this first renewal. So that's what and that's what you'll see on your consent agenda. We agree that he's entitled to this first renewal, and that's what's in front of you today. We just disagree over what happens in 20 years.
Noted.
So we're asking for, well, we're actually asking for the BCC to enforce the terms of the lease as we see them. But if not, then if not willing to do that today, we're asking for you to approve this 20-year lease renewal, and we'll take up the issue of future renewals later.
Thank you. John Whitfield.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question
Yes,
on
sir.
that issue?
I'm
before
sorry,
we-
Mr. Whitfield. Give us just a minute.
I'm sorry. I want to make sure I'm following along. So, and I think I see perhaps a disconnect. I just want to see if my mind's there, and I understand we're not voting on this today. At least not on, I don't think we're deciding how many renewals there are today.
We would love it if the commissioners would see the wisdom in doing so, but there's nothing on the agenda for that. Yes, sir.
But is the argument or is the interpretation to the multiple renewals based on the fact that the option term says that the renewal will renew the agreement with all the same terms? In other words, giving new life to the option each time you approve it? Is
Correct.
that the argument?
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
I understand.
Mhm.
I get it. Okay.
And I know Mr. Boyles is an attorney also, just like Trey is, and we all know that the law is not going to allow unlimited renewals. But I believe the flip side of that is that the court would interpret it in a reasonable manner. And I think that even reasonable people would have to agree that one would not be reasonable. So. All right.
Mr. Whitfield.
Thank you, County Commission and Sheriff, and for allowing me to speak my 3 minutes. I was not prepared, but I am now. I was not aware that I could speak when I got here, but I'm a pastor of New Bethel Methodist Church on 85 North, and next door is a development, and we keep getting these letters to come to the commission. This is the third one, and it gives us a map, and the map to me looks like not very clear. And I don't know what the intent or what effect we would have from this development, but I am concerned about development in this county and city area, that they'll knock down one house and put in 3 little houses, and what it does to our infrastructure already. I have seen some wonderful things. One of those things was the new light, 85 North, that the state put at Auburn Road. Up until that point, when I moved here 4 years ago, I noticed an accident every Friday. But since that light has been installed, it's a lot better traffic. I live off Auburn Road. That's my next subject. Auburn Road is a disaster. It's sounds like a railroad when you're going down it. It's rough, but it also, the drainage is dangerous. Down at the bottom area where the little creek is, they use the road itself for drainage. And when it rains a lot, you cannot see the lines or the roads, but that's another subject. When it hasn't been lined in a long time, the lines that you can hardly see are not magnetic. And so that affects people with the modern cars. And I would like to see that road paved sooner and something done with the drainage. And I yield my time.
Thank you, sir. As to the question of the public notice, Mr. Randy Woodruff is right behind where you were standing there. Randy, I'd like for y'all to exchange information so you can understand that process better. Is there anyone else from the public desiring to speak that did not get to fill out? Thank you. Carol Antun? Forgive me if I misspoke.
Can I pass these out to you all? Sure. Thank you.
We all received them via email.
I didn't have time to get nervous. Am I good to go?
Yes.
This is kind of a thank you as well as a request on behalf of Safe Connections Supervised Visitation Center. It's an honor to stand before you guys as the new director of Safe Connections. Today, I have the distinct pleasure of expressing our heartfelt gratitude to Okaloosa County for their generous grant of $48,128. This support is a testament to the county's unwavering commitment to the safety and well-being of our community's most vulnerable children and families. Safe Connections has been a cornerstone in providing supervised visitation and monitored exchange services, ensuring that children and survivors of domestic violence, child maltreatment, substance abuse, and other issues have a safe and supportive environment. Our work is deeply intertwined with the Okaloosa County courts, which refer families to our center, recognizing the critical role that we play in their journey towards healing and stability. We also have a contract with Northwest Florida, previously FFN, which also refers families to Safe Connections. To make Safe Connections more sustainable in our community, we humbly ask for a line item in the Okaloosa County budget. This would allow us to hire the necessary employees, as we currently operate all 3 centers with only 5 full-time staff members, and that includes myself and our finance manager. Our team handles everything from IT work, marketing, fundraising, to cleaning the toys, maintaining these centers, and testifying in court as well. Due to our small size, we can only conduct 1 fundraiser per year, which requires 4 to 5 months of preparation. In Walton County, we're equally fortunate to have a strong partnership. The county has graciously provided us with a building and its maintenance in Defuniak Springs, and $20,000 annually towards the running of our Defuniak Center. This collaboration underscores the shared responsibility we all have in fostering a safe environment for children and families in crisis. While our organization relies almost exclusively on grants and contracts, these funds are not always guaranteed. This uncertainty impacts our ability to retain employees when grants do not come through, as we saw this past year when we had to let our visit monitor in Crestview go. Despite this, we remain steadfast in our mission, driven by the support of our community and partners like Okaloosa County. This grant, and hopefully a line item in the budget, will enable us to continue providing the essential services that our children and families need, as we currently have a waiting list in all 3 of our centers. Once again, I extend our deepest gratitude to Okaloosa County for the grant that you all provided us. We are continually working on sustainability in our communities and humbly request consideration for the line item to ensure the sustainability of our vital services. Together, we are all making a difference as one family at a time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Antune, and hopefully you're not premature in the gratitude. It's on the
I know.
agenda for today.
I know.
So,
And that's why I was like, oh, no.
yes.
So, yeah, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. See anyone else from the public desiring to speak? All right. Moving to the consent agenda, commissioners.
I'd like to pull 2, if there's anybody here for the Constitution Week proclamation. If not, we'll just let it stay on the consent. Okay, so we will not pull 2, but we'll pull 20, please, for discussion.
So that was a motion to approve less 3/2025.
2025.
Motion by Commissioner Boyle.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Ketchel. Any further discussion? All in favor, signify with aye. Passes unanimously. Commissioner Ponder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. And I'll read the proclamation by title. And I believe we have some guests here with us in the room, and we'll call them forward at the end if that's okay, Mr. Chair, assuming it passes for a photo. It's a proclamation by title, a proclamation recognizing the month of September as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. Whereas children are one of Okaloosa County's most valuable resources, and their health is crucial to our county's economic development, continued success, and well-being as a whole. And whereas Northwest Florida reports an average of 50 local children are newly diagnosed with cancer each year. And whereas cancer is the #1 disease killer of children in the United States, yet childhood cancer research is severely underfunded, where less than 10% of the National Institute of Health allocates cancer research funding to children. And whereas research in the field of childhood cancer will allow for better treatment options, safe quality therapies, and ultimately a cure for this deadly disease. And whereas Rally Foundation for Childhood Cancer Research has provided a valuable resource to children and families who are afflicted with this horrendous disease. And now therefore be it resolved by the Board of County Commissioners, Okaloosa County, that they do hereby recognize September 2024 as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month and encourage others to participate in efforts throughout the year to raise awareness and funding for childhood cancer research with Raleigh Gulf Coast while supporting families who face devastating effects and costs. So, Mr. Chairman, I move this for a motion.
Motion by Commissioner Ponder, second by Commissioner Boyles. Any further discussion? All in favor signify with aye. That passes
And Mr.
unanimously.
Mr. Chair, if it's okay, I'd like to recognize Haley Brown, Program and Rally Kid Coordinator with Rally Foundation. If she could come forward, the Huskins family, Rally Kid Finley, who unfortunately passed away in October 2022, and then the Hutchins family, Rally Kid Anna Lee, local to Niceville, currently battling leukemia. If they're able to come forward, Mr. Chairman, it'd be outstanding for a photo and maybe even say a few words.
Yeah, I actually just wanted to say thank you to all of the commissioners and the county of Okaloosa for acknowledging this proclamation in this important month of September. And I do have Rally Kid Finley's mom here with me to accept this proclamation. Unfortunately, Rally Kid Annalie and her family could not attend this afternoon. This round of chemo is taking a really harsh toll on her, but we do definitely appreciate you guys pushing through this proclamation, and thank you.
Please say anything or no, you don't have to. You don't have to. Okay, it's up to you.
Well, I wasn't prepared, but I do want to say thank you so much and for acknowledging this and for making the proclamation. And I do want to let everyone know as well, we are having a fundraiser for childhood cancer research funding on October 12th at Eagles Nest, Finley Fest. We're going to have Jesse G come and perform food, kids activities, auction items. So keep an eye out for that.
Ms. Huskin, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
being able to share your experiences with people that need them. Captain Huskins, thank you for the way that you serve our county and for the way that you serve your family.
Thank you. Thank you.
If we are, he'll tell us.
Center up. I was gonna tell you to center up.
We want to force shots, but Ms. Huskin blocking. That looks. Captain, why don't you come take a picture?
All right. So really good. Okay. And give me 3 shots if you would. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay. Again. 1, 2, 3. One more time. And 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So I do want to thank the staff for the work that they put into this. It's important. We've already heard from Safe Connections today. The county has limited funds that we do allocate for nonprofits, 287,503 this year, I believe. But I would like to just see if I can get consensus from the board that the staff go ahead and work next year towards development of policy that reflects funding for nonprofits that perhaps reflects more what the county and the court system. In other words, Safe Connections is a perfect example of the kind of thing we should be funding. That's violent parents or parents that can't get along, who use their children as weapons. That's a great source that we're funding. Also, legal services. Many people come pro se. That means they come without an attorney into the court. So if we could focus more on the kinds of things where the court or the county, that's what I'm asking. And other than that, I'll move for approval this year so we can get this into the budget and thank everybody for their hard work.
Second for some follow-up. I'll say I support the you know, I won't say that I necessarily agree with every dollar amount or every individual entity, but our staff has put a tremendous amount of work into this process. We have refined this process several times. I'm proud of the process, and that is by no means to say that it is perfect. And I won't be here, so it probably doesn't matter, but I suspect, if it comes in the next 60 days or so, certainly be happy to look at further refinements to make sure that each year we make this process better and really target to the entities, the types of entities, whether it's the size of the entity, but then also to the services that are being provided. As we know, we're looking for supporting entities that and somehow create a positive benefit on the otherwise responsibilities that we have as county commissioners to expend our ad valorem tax dollars for the benefit of our citizens. And so I'm certain we can continue to learn each year and then make after the fact adjustments to policy. And Commissioner, I appreciate the way you're approaching it. I think that's the right way to do it rather than to try and, kind of go back in and recraft what the good work that staff has done.
So, yeah, I had quite a conversation with Ms. Fitzgerald about that. I know there's been a lot of hard work behind the scenes. So if I could get consensus on that, I would really appreciate it. Otherwise, I'll move for.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Goodwin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too am very pleased with the fact that we have a nonprofit funding policy in place, that we've come up with a set of rules that nonprofits can look to understand how we're going to go about delegating things out. I can tell you, I think at least when Commissioner Boyles, Commissioner Ketchel and I were here, years ago, it was more ad hoc and nobody knew what they were going to get. And so I think having a process is excellent, and refining the process is a great idea. The only reason that I asked to speak, though, on this issue is I do kind of hear in the request, and I understand, that what Safe Connections does, and we have certainly supported Safe Connections, and there's nothing to suggest we wouldn't continue to do so. But I have kind of heard what almost sounds like maybe a request that they kind of get into become a budget item and not in this process. And I'll just say, it's not that I don't hear the request and understand the rationale behind it, but I'm not sure that's the right way for the county to go. I think the format we use now for nonprofits is better. And I say that to say, I think when an entity jumps from becoming part of the nonprofit annual application process to something on the county, a line item on the budget, it's probably when they've risen to the level that they have a contract for services with the county. So it's not that it could never be done, but I'm not sure that we're in that box yet. So anyway, I just because I feel like maybe the request is there, but you're not really getting an answer. I'll tell you, just from my perspective, we're not there yet. I think you got to stay in the process we have. I'm very glad to see that staff has suggested the amount they have. I think, all the entities chosen are good partners with our community, but they're not to the level where they're necessarily, doing contract services for the county. So that's kind of the distinction for me. Anyway, I'll support it. I think it's a good process, and certainly support Commissioner Ketchel's concept of, further sharpen our pencil on the policy.
I'll quickly add that in talking with the Council on Aging right now, they house the poorest of the poor, those who absolutely have no way to care for themselves in a nursing home. They have 14 veterans. That's what I was told currently in-house. That's something we should be taking care of. And in addition, and there's so many worthy causes. Housing is a huge issue here in this county right now, and especially for those who are aging out of foster care. So there's many needs, but I agree with you. The line item is not something I would support. I just want to go back to the drawing board and see if we can tighten this up a little bit. So I thank my fellow commissioners.
Mr. Boyles.
I'm sorry, one more final bite. I just want to thank you, commissioners. You guys are going to be here. I'm leaving. I think when I first came on the commission, we had a series of line items. They were effectively line items because just every year they rolled over, and they were these groups we supported. And finally I asked one year, why are we doing this? And the answer was because we did it last year and we did it the year before that. And so it was just assumed that it was a part of the budget, and we broke that process. And I know as difficult as it is for certain organizations to want to have that certainty and continuity, the reality is that's exactly the type of process that we're looking to avoid. You could input Safe Connections or frankly any one of the other 12 organizations on this list and make the same exact argument as to the really important, critical work that they do and why that they should get money every year. We can't do that. If we start doing that, then we're just regressing and we're going exactly in the opposite direction that we've worked so hard to come forward on a competitive process that forces these organizations to restate their case and prove each year why they need those dollars coming out of what at the end of the day are county tax dollars. And so I'm not speaking to any of y'all, you all get it, but Commissioner Ponder's not going to be here. I'm not going to be here. We're going to have some new folks on this board. And I just hope that we don't, as we move forward, everyone continues to remember there's a reason why we're doing it this way. And as hard as it is to look at a great organization doing a great thing and say, I can't put you in my budget perpetually. There's a reason we're doing it. And it's not because we're being mean. Thank you.
I believe it boils down to essential services that really contribute towards quality of life within our residents. So I'm okay giving consensus to the idea of reviewing policy to see what the future may hold. I'm glad staff came up with the list that they did this time. There are things that I may not have done the same, but I don't sit on that committee. I'm just grateful that we have a committee that's able to bring us the suggestions for it so that it doesn't become more of a politicized issue. So with that, any further discussion? All in favor, signify with aye.
Aye.
It passes unanimously. Item 25.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, and I'll invite Mr. Autry up to have some back and forth on this one. So this is a request for an extension of 164 days with CW Roberts contracting for the library. Church road improvements. One of the things that came out of this contract being awarded, if I remember correctly, Mr. Autry, was a change to our or in the process of awarding this contract was a change to the way that we calculate the penalty that's to be applied for contract overruns.
Liquidated damages.
Thank you. That was a very good and positive change that this board made because of another contract with this contractor that has run way too long. And so I'll admit to almost losing my lid when I saw that we were adding 164 days to this contract. And when you go and look at the reasons why, there's some weather days, there are some utility days, and there was something else random that added to these days, if I remember correctly. I just think we are at a place where we now need to once again revisit, because I don't think we've kind of completely ironed out the looseness with which contractors can find ways to extend contracts and ultimately then avoid those liquidated damages or not timely complete projects. And I want to say, I understand that, conditions in the field are sometimes not as presented, that you do have weather delays that can be legitimate, but given where we're at on this contract and the number of days that's being requested, to me, this is excessive. Mr. Autry has indicated that, within the confines of the language of the contract, these are legitimate. And so I'm going to take that for what it is, and we'll make the motion here in a minute to approve the request. What I would like, commissioners, would be consensus to direct staff and legal to go back and take a look at the process and our policy going forward on the allocation of these contract extension days, and maybe a policy that puts a maximum cap on the number of days percentage-wise relative to the overall duration of the performance, or some other methodology that helps to constrain. And then the other thing that I'm going to ask, which I think is separate and quite frankly would require some more effort. We've talked about this, or at least I've pitched this in the past. So counties to our east and to our west both have utility franchises. So the public rights of way belong to the public. They don't belong to us. They don't belong to the contractors using them to make money. Our power companies, our cable companies, they're all for-profit entities at the end of the day. And so they're providing a needed service, and I get that, and that's important, but we're providing a needed service too, and that's mobility up and down those roadways. And so what we've seen on this project and what we saw on the PJ Adams project, quite bluntly, was utility contractors who have no motivation to move quickly to get their infrastructure clear so that our road projects can continue. And that was at least, I think it was half of the days here.
That's right.
Are as a result of utility conflict delays, because there's frankly no motivation to encourage them to move quickly. We could implement a utility franchise in Okaloosa County. We do not have to use it as a money-making mechanism. And so that's how franchises were in part, I think, initially envisioned, is that there is a fee that has to be paid from the utility company to the local government, and it basically becomes a pass-through tax that goes onto a utility bill. That's all well and good. I'm not recommending that. If our neighbors like that, that's fine. I'm not looking at increasing the tax burden. We can use the same methodology, though, to get at a contract that requires that contractor to enter into a set of stipulations in exchange for the right to make use of those right of ways for profit. And it would simply require, for example, that they have X number of days to engage and get their infrastructure moved, or they become liable for the cost of the delays of these really important construction projects, rather than effectively the citizens becoming responsible at the end of the day. So I'll bundle those two together if I can get consensus to direct staff and legal to come back with options as to both. If not, then I will separate them out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, if I might, I'd like to hear from Mr. Autry because we deal with these same asphalt companies over and over again. I'd like to kind of get your take on this.
Yeah, as Commissioner Boyles and I spoke about this briefly beforehand, and I expressed to him that as soon as I saw it, I actually called the contractor and had a very similar concern that this is 50% of your overall contract time to begin with, which is just exceptionally frustrating. I would also, I'd like both of those ideas. I also would like to look at possibly providing incentive clauses inside of our contract. Maybe that gets some attention. Right now, what we often hear is there's a labor issue, which means that they simply are just finding any way to extend it to delay anything they possibly can. It's not unique to this contractor, to be fair. It's very common that we see this. So on top of these issues, I would also like to look at potentially some sort of incentive notion in a contract that if there's an extension of a certain number of days, that incentive disappears. Or if they don't meet the time that we have in there. So I love the idea of finding a way to get better, because nothing pains me more than to say we're going to get a project done at a certain time frame and then have to stand up here and tell the board or tell the public that we can't meet it for whatever the reason is, legitimate or otherwise. It doesn't make the problem any better out in the field.
With this,
Frustrating part, I'm sorry, I took the floor when you were talking to Larry.
Sorry.
May I finish this? real
Yes.
quick? The frustrating part, I mean, I hear it from everybody. How come they're not doing any work out there on, and it's always utilities, but people can't see that.
Utilities are a really big piece of this puzzle. Really big piece of this puzzle. To Commissioner Boyle's points, that's where the franchise has some possibilities, and I'd be happy to look forward to working with Lynn to come up with some ideas.
with this being in my district, I would like to suggest that we table this.
Fair?
And let me tell you why. Amongst other reasons that have already been stated. One, Caitlin's Preserve, which is immediately south of their lay yard. They've built up the ground of their lay yard and then added their material on top. And so the 6-foot fence is now about 3.5. And so the neighbors that live across there are facing the consequences of this project. I would hate to see that continuation mean that they have another 6 months to wait to get backyards back or to get privacy on their back porch back. We've had some issues with trash cleanup, with porta potty locations. There've been several different things. I just don't think we're ready with the options currently presented to make action to give extra time without any type of.
I think that's a great
leeway.
idea.
Okay. If that seeks the board. I obviously cannot make a motion, but.
I'll make the motion to table, but I mean, I think part of the delay should be part of the 164 days.
Sure.
It shouldn't be delayed 15 or 30 to then give another 164 on top of that. I mean, I remember when we had the discussion, we put parameters in to begin with. And that we had the hard and fast affirmation that they would meet the deadline or else type penalty type.
Correct.
And to Commissioner Boyle's point, I think I mean, some of this is just taking advantage of language. And I don't mind tightening it up. I'm not looking to expand government in any form or fashion, but I mean, I think when they give us these contractors we deal with out of just pure integrity and they give it to us, we should be able to trust them that we're not going to get a handback of 5 more months delay, because like Commissioner Mixon, I'm hearing from constituents up here very frustrated about that. And so I would only ask that as part of that whatever we delay it to does not become an additional days to the 164.
And I believe that would be reasonable because they still have an expectation of finishing the project. So I don't see them stopping because we decided to table this item.
Well, they're still under contract regardless. So I actually will take this as really strong support. This helps the discussion I can have with the contractor. I'm going to use it for this contract. And then I really like the idea of finding ways to improve it. Because like I said, this is the most difficult thing that I deal with in terms of we're trying to get a good infrastructure project done and it's taking 50% longer than what we had thought.
All right. Commissioner Goodwin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And procedurally, I guess, do we need a second at this point to?
I'll second.
Okay. So a couple questions. In reading the agenda back up, I wasn't 100% clear and I didn't go separately pull the entire contract, I'll be honest with you. But is it staff's position that the time delay and the request for extension, are those days that the contractor is entitled to recoup under the contract terms?
Yes, they're entitled to recuperate days for a couple of reasons. Weather days, pretty self-explanatory, utility delays, in other words, they can't do a certain step in the project until the utility is relocated. And then the other piece of this project is that there was a change in the approach from a multiple phase, a two-phase maintenance of traffic. Nodes are going to shift the traffic once. It didn't fit once they got out into the field. That kind of led to some of the issues they're seeing at Caitlin's Preserve to a three-phase approach. The redesign and the additional time required to do that was a bulk of the days inside of there. So there were three different reasons. Two of them were in the contract, utility delays and the weather delays. The third one is sort of a change in the contract approach.
Okay, and then for the third one, was that something we asked them to do, or did they do that on their own?
It was a site constraint. So when we got out there into the field, we realized we couldn't make the two work. And so we asked the engineering firm to come up with a new approach to the project approach. So it's sort of it's the constrictions of the field work.
So in risk allocation, weather delays, the county is bearing the risk.
Correct.
With utility conflicts, county is bearing the risk.
Correct. Other than the cost.
Okay, other than the cost.
Because currently utilities are we don't pay for the relocation costs.
Okay, but we bear the burden of
Time burden,
days.
correct.
So they're entitled to ask for those days.
Correct.
And then for the last piece, that was a change on the traffic management that we asked for.
The approach to the project, yeah, to make it so you could physically construct the project. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Well, and the reason I'm asking, because it seems to me, we do have a fairly powerful tool to use when these jobs don't come in on time. But if these are contractual, I mean, if these are risks that we contractually took on, I mean, I don't think that we've got much of a stick to shake at them on that. If we agreed to take that on, which is normally the owner does take on weather for sure and other force majeures. So that's not unusual. I'm not surprised about that. In fact, I'd be surprised if the contractor took it on, but utilities, I guess it just depends on how you've allocated that out. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I got no problem, making sure that we're being tough on the contractors, but if they're entitled to it, then I'm not really sure they've done anything wrong in asking for that time. So anyway, the flip side of that is it seems to me if they are delaying projects beyond what they're contractually entitled to do, one, we can deny the time. Two, they'd be in breach, right?
It would be liquidated damages if we ran into an overage on time.
Or couldn't we just call them a material breach and call their performance bond?
I would consult our attorney on that. So
I mean, I think more than liquidated damages, I think for most of these contractors that do public work, they have to bond them.
Capacity.
If you claim on their bond and call them a material breach, that's going to cause a ripple effect in all their other work. In fact, it may disqualify them from bidding on other work. So I suspect most of them are going to be cautious not to get to that point.
Sure.
I would think anybody that's been doing this a while watches that closely. So I think we do have some powerful tools, to use already. But again, in a situation like this, based on the facts as they sound like they're being, the facts presented and the way the contract reads, there's nothing for us to do except take the claim up and provide the days.
I have no issues whatsoever with tabling it to give the opportunity to take this opinion of the board, these comments back to the contractor and letting them understand where we stand with it from a perspective of getting it completed and then coming back with a resolution of that. And then the second piece of it is how can we find ways to not get into these kind of situations with future contracts. So I think there's two pieces to this that I gladly take back.
Yeah. So can you control the weather? You'll avoid
Never.
a lot of it.
Not in this part of the state.
Ma'am, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
You can't control the weather, but I mean, at the end of the day, the contractor can decide how aggressively they want to utilize those provisions within a contract. And I think that's part of the problem. I mean, it's Florida, right? Like, the mail runs every day, the trash gets picked up every day. Contractors If it looks like it might be cloudy, may decide to call it for the day and, go have a beer. That's fine. Let's get our contract tight enough where they're gonna have to make tough decisions about how early in the work do they want to leverage those days before they're gonna hit their cap that they've got within that contract. I think that's my point. To me, that seems a pretty reasonable adjustment we can make as we negotiate contracts in the future. And then again, the franchise issue to me, again, seems to be reasonably straightforward. It's at the end of the day, it's not an expansion of government so much as it is utilizing the public property that we're entrusted with effectively to the maximum benefit of our constituents. So yeah, we have a motion, we have a second. I guess we'll do consensus separately. It sounds like.
Do you have a
I
desire?
just want to add a couple words. I like your idea of incentives. So for future thought on that.
Thank you.
And I'm not trying to beat up on this contractor because this contractor happens to do great work.
This
At
is,
the airport and everything.
it's
Thank
not
you.
unique to them. It's an unfortunate
I wanted to make that
trend
clear.
we see in these
Thank you.
contracts, but yeah, I appreciate it.
All right, all in favor, signify with aye. Opposed, passes unanimously.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Did that include consensus on all three topics of looking at franchise, looking at incentives, and looking at tightening up the maximum
Caps on additional days.
caps on additional days?
Yeah.
In exploration.
It's looking at it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was in exploration. Table the item and he'll come back with his findings from exploration. Is that?
That's good.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to be on the record. I didn't say franchise. I understand the rationale behind it, and I
understand
get
getting
it,
the-
but it's, I don't know, it can be a volatile topic.
Yeah. Okay,
Sure.
to be super clear, it does not have to include a discussion of any pass-through costs to the utility company, and therefore it is not a discussion of an increased burden to our taxpayers. Period. You can have the discussion. We could stipulate that at the outset. The discussion can be had. Ms. Hoshar, correct me if I'm wrong, the fee can be nominal, but ultimately the terms of the franchise can require the contractors to act in a certain behavior. If they don't, then this is a non-starter relative to trying to constrain these excessive numbers of days, because they, as in the site contractor, the road contractor, will continue to point the finger at whoever they can, the power company, MediaCom. They'll have a whole list of folks they can point their finger at and go, well, they didn't move that particular pole that day, or they didn't move that particular wire that day. And so we're going to be just running in a circle. And so I don't know if we're afraid of, not sure what we're afraid of about even being willing to have the conversation about how we can more effectively get grips on this issue.
I certainly have no issue at least exploring the options, and if
You don't, but my fellow commissioners
with
do
you.
right now.
I'm
So
with you.
I got to get
I'm
them to
trying to-
agree, not you.
I'm
so.
trying to.
Sure, can I
All
do
right.
one last thing?
Sure.
Structure thing. I mean, I don't mind looking at options. Here's my issue is we're all dealing with grown adults in the contracting world with this. They're all excellent companies. I agree. It's not their first, none of these are their first rodeo. We're not taking a swing on someone who doesn't know what they're doing. I think they could all be adults in the room, and that's all due respect is if they know utilities are coming in, it shouldn't come as a surprise that there's utilities coming in. I think that conversation should be had up front. And they know, hey, Mr. Utility A and B, this is what we're doing. Okay, good. They work it out with them because they got a deadline with us to fix the roads to the commissioner's point. So I don't know if we need to go too far outside the fence line on this thing, but I think it's a matter of bringing some options that are real and practical. And then
The issue we run into is the contractor doesn't control that utility agency, which is where the franchise could be a benefit.
and I've got that part, but
We
that's where a
understand.
conversation where we work it out, and they know there could be downstream issues that could be alleviated by a conversation around coffee or whatever.
All right, we have 7 public hearings today. The first is a public hearing to consider a proposed ordinance creating Okaloosa County Local Provider Participation Fund related to hospital assessments. I'll ask Mr. Hofstad to introduce the item.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I'll kick this item off. We were approached several months ago, I guess now, by Mr. Nordness with North Okaloosa Medical Center and some of his legal consultants related to a fee that has been authorized by the governor, whereby local jurisdiction can implement a special assessment directly to a hospital. And that assessment can therefore be utilized to try and pull back federal Medicaid dollars that we otherwise not had access to. In the case of the hospitals, they have to provide indigent care, much like we do with indigent burials, and we bear that responsibility and that cost. That's a cost driver for the hospitals, to the point where this program allows access to those Medicaid dollars. We requested a series of meetings. I think they've met with commissioners individually. It has brought us to this point now where there's certain steps that have to be taken should the board decide to implement this assessment locally. There are a number of jurisdictions throughout the state that have implemented this fee, largely in the central and south Florida area of the state, but I believe they do have some counties here in the Panhandle that have implemented this fee as well. From that, Lynn was engaged on the legal side. She's been working very closely with the hospital's legal team to get us to the point where we're at today. And not wanting to step on what Lynn has done, I would certainly defer to Lynn to give the board a briefing on what actions have been taking place today and what is being asked of this board today.
Thank you, Mr. Hofstad. So as Mr. Hofstad stated, we did have meetings with Colleen Ernst and her group, her team to, I believe they've reached out to each commissioner as well. To add on Mr. Hofstad's summary, this is a two-step process. What's the public hearing scheduled for today is for the board to consider an ordinance that authorizes the board to then adopt a resolution to actually impose it. But so today would be the consideration of the draft ordinance before you, which our office has reviewed, and we made minor edits to, working with Ms. Ernst. We also have a public hearing scheduled for September 17th, which is to consider a resolution actually imposing the special assessments on the hospitals. This only applies to the private hospitals here in the county, and that is North Okaloosa, HCA Fort Walton Beach, and Twin Cities. And in the agenda packet from the last board meeting, you had letters of support from all three hospital CEOs, as well as chairmen of the Board of Trustees that were supporting this hospital assessment to be put in place. Here, Colleen Ernst is here to, I don't know if you want to make a presentation or answer questions.
She did fill out a speaker card.
Oh, okay.
Wait, if you want her now, or do you want her at the
Certainly.
public comment time?
Nope, that's,
Okay. You're
happy to turn
welcome.
it over.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Push the speak.
Good afternoon, everyone. Colleen Ernst from Adelanto Healthcare Ventures. We're a company that works with hospitals across Florida to find opportunities to seek reimbursement for charitable care services and for Medicaid care. Charity care services are those services rendered to individuals who fall below the qualifying income threshold and who are uninsured. These are individuals who require medical services and cannot pay. Medicaid services are services that are designed for individuals who are low income and who fall into the categories of being medically needy with a qualifying disability or condition or in a qualifying state of life. One statistic that I find staggering, roughly 45% of all births in the state of Florida are Medicaid births. So this is a sizable population. The hospitals across Florida have an opportunity, and in many parts of the state, including a few counties here in the Panhandle, that opportunity has been pursued. Basically, Floridians, everyone in this room who's paying federal taxes is paying money to the federal government. Some of that money has been approved and earmarked specifically to help Florida's hospitals care for these populations, but the state has been leaving those federal dollars on the table. This program helps Florida bring those dollars back to follow the patients who need these specific types of charity care and Medicaid services. Now, in 2021, Governor DeSantis agreed that the state should pursue this program, but he said we're not going to take money from individual citizens or businesses in order to draw in those federal dollars. The solution then was to have assessments imposed by local governments on only the private hospitals. So if the board moves forward with this special assessment, only the hospitals receive a bill, no one else. The hospital dollars then qualify for those federal dollars that the state had otherwise been leaving on the table. That match comes into the community, following the patient and enhancing the reimbursement for their reimbursement for Medicaid services and charity care services, specifically for those categories, again, following the patients, ensuring that the hospitals can sustain that type of care. There are 26 jurisdictions in the state that do this. Some of your neighbors, Escambia County, Bay County, Leon County, and all the way down to Miami-Dade. So the hospitals here are very supportive of this. It's odd that someone comes and says, please send us a bill. We'd like to be assessed. But again, the purpose here is to draw in those federal dollars that come in as match and help the hospitals sustain these services. So in a nutshell, that's the program.
I did have one more thing to add. So in discussions with Ms. Ernst, we had requested that the hospitals indemnify the county for any potential liabilities in the future. HCA Corporate has a corporate policy against indemnifications. However, they have expressed a willingness to enter, like to sign a release, basically a release of liability. We have traded drafts and sent over a version for the hospitals to consider before the board actually imposes the assessments, if it so chooses to move forward.
Okay, we'll open for public comment. Ms. Ernst, if we have questions in a moment, I'll call you back on.
Thank you.
Matt King.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this issue. So I had sent Chairman Mixon a letter on this on June 3rd, and I will save you the time of reading the entire letter, but I just want to highlight one quick paragraph. So the LPPF, the Local Provider Fund model, would unlock vital supplemental payments that otherwise may be unavailable to Okaloosa County's hospitals. The LPPF proposal facilitates access to additional funding without burdening local or state taxpayers or non-hospital businesses. The LPPF impact cannot be understated. The increase in reimbursement will provide local hospitals with supplemental funding we desperately need as we serve impoverished Floridians. So we're not asking for a single penny from local funding. We're not asking for a single penny of state. This is simply for matching federal dollars. Thank you.
Mr. King, are you with HCA?
Yeah, yes, I apologize. I'm Matt King. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of HCA Florida, Fort Walton Destin Hospital.
For the record.
Yes, thank you.
Mike Nordis.
Thank you. I'm Mike Nars. I'm the CEO of North Okaloosa Medical Center. First of all, thank you, commissioners, for taking this into consideration. We appreciate it. As Mr. King stated, we're all in support of this. We want to take care of everybody in the county. And so as you all know, some of those our charity care don't have any means of payment or it's underfunded what is paid through some of the Medicaid and other programs. In order for us to continue to evolve and grow with this county, these funds are a huge part of that. So just as my colleagues have done in growing their facilities in the South, in putting money back into them to provide the care that this county needs, we're doing the same here in the northern part of the county. We want to be able to continue to do those types of things. So this type of funding helps to support us so that we can reinvest, bring great quality healthcare to this entire county. And we appreciate you taking it into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Zach McCluskey.
Good afternoon. I'm Zach McCluskey, CEO of HCA Florida, Fort Walton Destin Hospital. It feels odd that I'm asking you permission to pay money into a fund to create an assessment, but that's what we're doing today. So we are willing to step forward and be a part of a special assessment that's bared exclusively by the hospitals, not any risk for the citizens or the businesses of Okaloosa County. What this will allow us to do, as you heard from Colleen, is receive matching funds to increase our reimbursement for Medicaid and unfunded patients. Our lights are on 24/7. We're there for people when they need us. We ask how we can help you first before we ask if you have the ability to pay us. And that's our commitment, and that's what we'll continue to do. If we have mechanisms like this that are available to us that can help offset some of that burden of the care costs exceeding our reimbursement, it's prudent for us to do that and will make our healthcare organization stronger here in Okaloosa County. So appreciate your consideration, and you have our support of our organization, our Board of Trustees. We're in conjunction with North Okaloosa, and I speak on behalf of my colleague from Twin Cities as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public desire to speak on this item? This time we'll close the public hearing. Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, question for Lynn. Lynn, can we, so what I want to make sure we accomplish is, release of liability, indemnity, however you want to frame it that you're comfortable with. I want to ensure that we have that from all participating entities. And so, my concern there probably is remote. But as I understand this program, it was originally envisioned as a kind of a state match relative to federal dollars, and I won't get into the back and forth policy over who should be paying for what. At the end of the day, that is what it is. There was I think probably some philosophical, political differences between those two levels of government, and it resulted in this kind of workaround legislation that kicked the ball to us here at local government. Nothing new there. We're used to, I think, being on the bottom side of that slope. What I want to ensure is that if the federal government were to make some type of interpretation in the future that prohibited this, match money that flows to these institutions, then these institutions are somehow out the dollars that we have collected and then sent on down the line, that there is an absolute inability for those institutions to seek recoupment from us, i.e. from the taxpayer. And so I don't know that that needs to be in this ordinance. I think if I'm understanding, what we could probably do is adopt the ordinance today and then require that those satisfactory releases or indemnifications be in hand prior to our vote at the upcoming hearing to actually make the assessment. Is that inaccurate?
That's correct. The ordinance says that any imposition of the assessments would be subject to the hospitals executing a release in the form of approved by the county attorney. I have let Ms. Ernst know that we would need those releases executed and back to us prior to the agenda submission deadline for the next meeting. So we won't even move forward with the item unless we have those releases in hand.
Got it. Okay. And in that instance, then this would simply sit and the ordinance would be in place, but there would be no collection under it. And we could either come back and kill it or just let it sit there.
That's correct. And our concern was the same as yours, that in the unlikely event that there's some sort of determination made by the federal agencies and there's some sort of clawback, the county's not holding on to any of this money, right? And so the hospitals pay it to us, we turn around, submit it to ACA. And so if there were any clawback, and we're talking significant funds. And so that was my concern of any potential liability to the county. And so we feel that the execution of the release would sufficiently protect the county in that instance.
Well, certainly appreciate your efforts in protecting us.
Before we move too far in discussion, could we have a motion in a second?
I'll move approval.
Motion by Commissioner Boyles.
I'll second for discussion.
Yes, ma'am.
The
Commissioner
question
Kitchell.
I have is who bears the expense for the county? In other words, we're going to be asked to, there's going to be some additional personnel expense here as we try to handle this. How does that get paid for?
That's actually a very good question. I'm glad you mentioned it. So part of the assessment funds, 150,000 would be allocated for the county's like administrative cost. Guess it's been up to 150,000. So that would come out of the assessment fees.
As Mr. Hofstad, have we taken a look to see if that would cover the cost of personnel?
Well, it's a new program. So, that's a de minimis cost back to the county. I can't envision a scenario where it would take, a staff person full time to manage this.
No, it's three hospitals already.
So it remains to be seen, but I would think based on what I know of us receiving funds and remitting funds, that, we could certainly accommodate that inside of that particular budget.
Thank you.
Mr. Goodwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a couple questions, but I guess I'll start with the first one regarding what Ms. Ishihara was talking about with the release versus the indemnification agreement. You know, and as I understand it, that of course then would relate to any potential clawback on dollars, because we're going to release those dollars out of our possession. We'll have them to remit if they are clawed back. So effectively, can you, I mean, I know you started, I think, with a recommendation maybe towards an indemnification, and we're landing on release, but I think those are things that sometimes get discussed in the same sentence, but they're very different animals maybe in a lot of ways. I was wondering if you could extrapolate on the difference of those, because really, I guess, you know, and maybe as you do that, talk about, you know, who might the county be culpable or liable to in the event that there's a clawback, because I'm trying to determine whether a lease would actually be meaningful in that situation.
Oh, I see. So, right, the release basically releases us from the hospital seeking any reimbursement from us. But I guess you're asking it, if it's not an indemnification to release us from the feds clawing back. I'll have to pull that up. Hold on.
Right. I guess while you're looking at what I'm concerned about is, if I get released from somebody, but they're not the one that I owe, the release doesn't mean anything. And just trying to find out who might we owe the money to if there's a clawback. Would it only be to the hospitals? And if that's the case, then the release may be sufficient.
Ms. Ernst?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to this, and thank you for the question. It's a good one. So basically, the thought process behind this is that the county's action in adopting a rate setting resolution results in a bill only to the hospitals. They're the ones who effectively have a legally cognizable harm and would have standing to pursue any type of action against the county. Those facilities are all willing to sign a release of claims, forfeiting their right to ever bring suit or bring any type of challenge. Now, if there is this vision of what would happen if the federal government, let's say, changed the rules on whether these dollars would qualify for a federal match. Well, if that's the case, then the hospitals would simply stop asking the county to send them a bill, because there's no reason to. They would no longer get the federal match. So hopefully we wouldn't find ourselves in a situation where the hospitals are getting assessed and there's a different set of rules where they wouldn't qualify. Now, if there was a determination that the dollars from the federal government shouldn't be coming here, the chain of custody of those dollars doesn't include the county. So the county never handles the federal funds. The federal funds go to the state. They're distributed to the hospitals based on the utilization and the volume. So in that scenario, the federal government would look to the state, who would look to the hospitals. The county wouldn't be in the middle of that. But the design of the releases is to ensure that the action taken by the county, again, the imposition of this assessment, and all those entities that would have any type of standing to raise a cognizable claim, that the county is not in a position of ever facing any type of lawsuit from those entities. One, because they wouldn't be here asking for this assessment, and two, because they've actually forfeited that right to bring suit.
Okay, thank you. That's actually very helpful. And I guess my last question on this would be the one that I guess is really the one I expect to be asked by constituents if I'm, you know, caught in the, you know, in the grocery store or at church. How does this equate to a impact on reducing healthcare costs to patients and residents?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. So there are two pieces that I would highlight there. Number one is that this population will always need care. There will always be individuals who are in need of services and cannot pay, whether they're charity care patients or whether they're Medicaid care patients. And right now, when the hospitals in Okaloosa are annually providing about $25 million and $14 million, respectively, of those categories of care, that's money they're losing. That's their actual cost that's not reimbursed. Hospitals are businesses, and they have to find ways to offset those losses. That's just a reality. So the thought here is bringing in these federal dollars, helping these hospitals offset those losses that way, gets rid of the need to offset it any other way. It allows them to expand their services. It allows them to ensure everyone gets care. And it should ensure these hospitals are able to, again, focus on curing the losses that way, not through other patients, not through commercial insurers.
Thank you.
Mr. Ponder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate that. I do have a question. First, JD, Mr. Clerk, I guess this funding formula, you go with this to the clerk's office?
So Lynn sent us some of this information a week or so ago, and I've sent it to my team because it's very complicated, as we just found out. And it's different responsibilities. I appreciate the questions you're asking. It's a little premature for me to say that I'm fine with it or not fine with it. I think it's as you move through the process, we will get up to speed a little better, but certainly we'll know what's going where, but I'm not really comfortable saying I'm all on board yet. So I'll just follow y'all's lead.
Fair enough. Another question?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Ernst, thank you again for your presentation earlier. You mentioned this is in 26 other jurisdictions around the state, as close as Escambia and the Panhandle. And I heard the exchange with Commissioner Goodwin. My question is just, and I understand foundationally what y'all are trying to do is bring some of those funds back. And I don't even know if the funds come back directly to these specific hospitals, or do they come back to HCA Florida and go to an HCA somewhere else around the state? I don't know if we get the direct impact here or there or not, but my question is, I mean, part of this is going to be funds from the hospital to what will be approved by the some sort of mechanism here. Have the funds got to come from cash flow, so therefore there is a true expense, and so therefore have you seen those 26 other jurisdictions do hospital costs to the patient then go up in order to offset these fees, so that it then becomes an impact to our constituents at home? And I didn't know if any studies have reflected even $5. I just don't know if you've seen anything where we could actually be like, oh my goodness, in an effort to, which I appreciate the out of the box thinking to come up with something really creative. I just want to make sure there's no downstream impact that we just haven't foreseen that could have an indirect impact on us.
That's a great question as well. And the design of this program is to truly ensure no one is burdened, that no one other than the hospitals asking for this assessment face any unintended consequences or unintended costs. Part of that is having an administrative fee built in every year to ensure county costs are totally covered, that there's nothing unanticipated there. The other piece of this is that there's actually a prohibition on any type of patient surcharge to pay for this assessment. So they do have to take it out of historic revenues. Now, of course, the end result is bringing in more money. So they should be ending in a positive financial picture, not a negative one.
Just one quick follow-up.
Yes.
With that in mind, is there any protection back to the safety of the county that, I mean, heaven forbid something happen where like, oh my goodness, this is actually working really well, but my goodness, we're going to see a cost in. Do we have the county then have a chance to reconvene and talk about this thing? Is that, can that be worked in the agreement that if there is, okay.
So, and that's another great question. This is annual. And so the rates are set every year. It comes before the board every year.
Thank you, Ms. Ernst. And thank you for the time that we had earlier throughout this year discussing this and the information that you had me go and read on my own. So that helped tremendously. Definitely would support this. I like that it's reviewed every year. I like that we have the opportunity today to create an ordinance, but then we have to take some action that gives some teeth to it down the road. And as long as things stay on the right track, I think that will continue just from my perspective. But commissioners, if there's no further follow-up, all in favor, signify with aye. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
The next public hearing is to consider a request to vacate a portion of right-of-way in the first addition to Lake Silver subdivision. Mr. Autry.
Step out of the way before they get me. This is a request to vacate a portion of right of way. I do want to point out that when we had the initial request to advertise, staff's position was not in favor of it. But thankfully, we did move forward and continue on having discussions with the applicant. What's not shown on this figure is there are actually two other rights of way that continue from South Silver Street north to Lakeview Drive south. What we looked at in talking with the applicant, and I saw Mark Steiner was here as well, is that this particular location has probably the worst in terms of topography and for a future connection, and that the other two locations are actually more desirable because the one that's to the west lines up with the Lake Silver Park parking area that we have over there. We do want to see a continued interconnectivity between this subdivision or these roadways and other roadways that are out there, which is still available through the two existing rights of way. And because of the conditions from a topographical standpoint, there is no objection that staff has to the requested vacation. We are not aware of any utilities that are located within this particular right of way, so it's not an issue with the request to vacate without stipulations. With that, the applicant is here as well. If there are any questions, we're certainly happy to answer them. We're just very pleased that we took the time to do the proper full investigation to come up with what we think is probably a better answer.
Before you move to public comment, will you show on this map where the other right?
Certainly. So if you look at the map that's up there, the U and south, there is a right of way that goes between South Silver Street and South Lakeview Drive. And then the other one is at the far end of that same roadway, which extends to the east. It's the very last, it looks like a lot that goes between South Silver Street up to South Lakeview Drive. So the third one is the middle one that is being vacated, which is listed as Shellcracker.
So just above the phase 2, page 185, written there.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I see it. That perfect. Yeah, plat book, page 2,
Plat book,
185.
sorry.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. We'll open for public comment. Does anyone from the public desire to speak to this item?
Good afternoon, Mark Steiner, Choctaw Engineering. We're the agent for the applicant. I just wanted to thank the county staff for taking the time to meet with me. I know that we first started this thing and there was an objection to it, and I understand where they're coming from. Being an engineer, designing roads and stuff like that, I appreciate the interconnectivity of the roads and whatnot. But I think we were able to work up an amicable solution and at the same time allow the applicant to vacate this roadway so he can further develop the property that he's currently developed, because the roadway which you see, which is South Silver Street, he actually built that road that's actually out there today. So the interconnectivity would have never happened unless the developer was improving some of the right of ways that the county already has and building out subdivisions out there. And we're going to continue to develop more and further increase the interconnectivity out there.
Great. Are you here for number 3 as well?
I am.
Okay, great. This will just read both. Anyone else from the public desiring to speak to this item? This time we'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, would you like to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, your district, you good?
Yes, sir.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Boyles, a second by Commissioner Ketchel. Any further discussion? All in favor, signify with aye. Aye. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Next is a quasi judicial public hearing to consider a proposed future land use map amendment and rezoning, which was continued from the last board meeting. This time I'll turn it over to Ms. Hoshihara.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Following the last board meeting, county staff, including myself, we met with the applicant's representatives to talk about some potential options for them to look at to address some of the concerns that the board members expressed. We have had a couple follow-up discussions, all very positive. They are in the process of talking to the seller/buyer, in which they're doing the property exchange. Given the long holiday weekend, that has not finished yet, and so they're asking that this public hearing be continued to the September 17th board meeting for the board's consideration.
Do we need a motion to continue or just no objections?
No, you would have to continue it to a date and time certain again.
Okay. So a motion to continue to September 17th. A motion by Commissioner Ponder, second by Commissioner Ketchel. Any further discussion? All in favor, signify with aye. It passes unanimously.
Mr. Chairman, before moving to the next item, Ms. Hoshihara, since this is the second continuous, should we advertise this one separately, or is it sufficient to have done it today?
That's the board's vote was sufficient.
Okay.
Fourth public hearings, quasi judicial public hearing to consider a proposed future land use map amendment and rezoning of a property located at 5976 North Highway 85. This time I'll turn it over to Ms. Hoshihara.
Yes, anyone here who's here to speak to this agenda item, if you will please stand, raise your right hand to be sworn in. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but?
I do.
I do, thank you. Now would be the appropriate time for any commissioners to disclose any ex parte communications you may have had on the item. No, thank you. I'll turn it over to Mr. Camper.
Thank you, Ms. Oshahar. Our next item is a future land use map amendment and a companion rezoning, 551-469 BCC 2024 and 551-470 BCC 2024 respectively, which is submitted by Choctaw Engineering on behalf of Day Development of Northwest Florida LLC, relating to the property located at 5976 North Highway 85 in Crestview, Florida. The request is to change the comprehensive plan future land use map designation for the subject property from rural residential and mixed use to low density residential or a more restrictive future land use map designation. If the future land use map amendment is approved, to request to rezone the property from rural residential and mixed use to R1, which is low density residential, or a more restrictive zoning district. The subject property contains 24 acres, more or less. Basically, you can see the property here on the aerial photograph displayed. That's what it is in relation to the surrounding properties. This is the current zoning. You can see it's rural residential immediately to the west side. It abuts R1 already, low density residential, and it has a little bit of mixed use down on Highway 85. If it was approved, this is what you would be going to as far as the overall layout of the future land use map. And in context of the surrounding area, this is how it looks in general the area. In the interest of time, I would enter the remainder of the staff report into the record if there's no objections. Hearing none, I'll go ahead and go on. The Planning Commission recommended approval of this future land use map amendment rezoning by unanimous vote during its regular meeting of August 8, 2024. The military representative on the Planning Commission was not in attendance and did not provide any written comments or objections prior to the meeting. No comments have been received subsequent to the Planning Commission meeting by staff. However, this one we were notified by way of, I believe, a telephone call. And I believe Ms. Hoshihara is aware of this as well, that there is a boundary dispute. A neighbor has stated that there is about a 26 foot wide discrepancy along the boundary line. However, staff did receive as part of this a survey, so we do not double check the signed and sealed surveys that we receive. So as our position, that would be a matter to be worked out between the private parties. The public notice was properly advertised in the Northwest Florida Daily News on August 19th, and public notice via certified return receipt letters were provided to all the property owners within a 300-foot radius, and a sign was posted. Staff has no objections to the proposed future land use map amendment and rezoning, and we recommend that the board take into consideration any comments. And then if it's decided to approve, the first motion would be to amend the future land use map, and then the second would do the companion rezoning. I'll be happy to answer any questions, and the applicant's agent is here as well.
Mr. Sonner, if you would like to speak.
And once again, Mark Steiner, Choctaw Engineering, agent for the applicant. And one of the things that I wanted to point out was the fact that we'd already got a development order for this piece of property for a subdivision. The property has since been sold, and the new owner has come to us and said, I'm already putting in the roads and all the infrastructure. Might as well, have the opportunity to increase the density so I can utilize the infrastructure that we're putting in to increase the density so we could create more housing. As Commissioner Ketchel said earlier, housing is a big problem and we don't have enough of. Now, I won't necessarily get into a debate as to where the housing goes and whatnot and stuff like that, but we have people out there who are willing to put forth the funds and whatnot to spend money to put in infrastructure and build houses out there. So that was the purpose behind this exercise, and that's why we're coming before you to ask for this change in the rezoning and the future land use.
This time we'll open to public comment. Does anyone from the public desire to speak? Yes, sir. For this item. Willard Wilson?
Chairman, may I say something?
Yes.
For the record, that was housing for the poor that I was saying, not rezoning housing.
Thank you for listening to me. I'm here for one purpose, and that's to try to preserve the value and use of my property. I got 15 acres, 3 acres of water, 2-story house. I've lived there for 45 years. I've worked on that property to get up to what I wanted. And now they're talking about putting a subdivision right adjacent to me. If you sign that, it's going to destroy the impact. It's going to have impact of about $200,000 probably on my property. I don't know. The IVP, the Environmental Protection Agency, ought to be in on this because the impact of this is they're going to build a holding pond, and it's going to have to be half as big as this room to catch all the water coming down off of those 60 lots, and it's a slope. It looks like a river whenever it rains. And whenever it goes over this here holding pond, it's going to go into wetlands. And that's against the law. And you don't know what all these there's 60 lots that's supposed to be going in there. And I cannot imagine about 35 of the lots is backing up to my property. And each one of them is going to have a sewer system. And I can't imagine what that is going to do when it gets down there to my lake. And I'm very, very concerned about this. I don't think you can guarantee that there's not going to be no overflow out of that into that wetland. Here's the impact, the wetland. Here's all the lots. And down here on the bottom is where the wetland is. And the overflow is going to go into them wetlands and into a beautiful creek. And it's going to join my creek. And they go on down to where Lake Silver used to be. So one stroke of the pen, just one stroke of the pen will just destroy what I've worked on for 45 years. I know you want, I'm not against subdivisions coming into this area. We got to have them, but you can decide on where they're put. And I don't believe that this is the property is feasible for a subdivision where it's talking about putting it.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Does anyone else from the public desire to speak to this item? Yes.
You misspoke. Did you say a sewer system or did you mean septic? This is going to be septic, right? These homes are going to be on a septic
I'm
system.
real hard of hearing and understand.
Now, Mr. Camper, is it? Okay.
Mr. Goodwin, did you?
I just have a couple questions, but I don't know, but I'll wait till after public comments
Okay.
closed.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right. If there's no one else from the public desire, Mr. Signer, you have a statement back.
Mr. Wilson,
Mhm.
how you doing?
Okay.
Good. I was going to come up here and try to address your comment.
And I use my land is used as a shooting range sometimes. And that's going to be right next to this subdivision. And you better think about that. You gonna take that private away from me? That slope of that land is it's awesome.
Mr. Wilson, thank you for your comments. If we have questions on those, I'll call you back up in a few moments.
Gonna do what?
If we have questions, I'll call you back up and address then.
Okay.
Thank you for your comments.
Yeah, this I don't know if you see the paper with all these lots. This is my land down here on the end. And all this all this property is gonna come over here on my land. And I'm very, very concerned about the sewage. 35 sewer lines and the lines is gonna back up to my property. I can't have it.
Yes, sir. Mr. Siner?
And I hope that you'll, take all this into consideration. I've had a lot of other things to say. The septicide, the stuff that the people put on their lots, you don't know what they're gonna use. And that's gonna go down into that wetland. And that's against the law. I don't believe this property is feasible for a subdivision, period. Thank you.
Yes.
Hey, Mark Siner, Choctaw Engineering. I just wanted to quickly, and I think you all know this, Land Development Code has very specific regulations as far as how to address stormwater. And like I said, we've already submitted and got a development order for this property. We're not going to change that development order in terms of the roadway, the stormwater and whatnot, just basically just add some additional loss to this subdivision. And I'm aware of Mr. Wilson's property. And as I told Mr. Campert, he called me earlier about the boundary issue and stuff like that. We're rezoning a piece of property. However, that shape of that property is won't change. The parcel ID will have the zoning attached to it. The shape of the property may be adjusted based on surveys, but that's something that occurs all the time. And that the stormwater system that we have will actually, in my opinion, as a professional engineer, will actually improve the quality of the runoff coming off this, because we'll actually retain that stormwater and then control the release of it to the wetlands that he described. So, as contrary to that might sound, the actual development of this property actually may improve the stormwater situation in this case. And if you have any questions about his comments or anything else regarding the development, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you. At this time, we'll close the public hearing. Would anyone from the commission like to make a motion?
I'd like to ask Mr. Camper something if I may.
Okay.
In the 2009 comprehensive plan, did we not, or it was way before any of us, but didn't we, as I've read it, it says that water sewer should lead the way in housing development, not septic. Am I correct on this?
There's policies in the comprehensive plan that indicate that the county was going to undertake by 2009 a master plan for sewer, and that would guide the future growth based on the extension of sewer. That plan was not done.
And
So
we've
there's
not
no-
done that, and yet we're continuing to develop and put septic in, which creates nitrogen, which flows into our waterways, which flows into our aquifer. And you and I've had this discussion, I'm making it public because it's a great concern to me.
The issue is the state rules are set up to allow up to a quarter acre, you can put a septic tank on a property. So that is the infrastructure that has been allowed on these subdivisions since, well before even the 2009 comprehensive plan was put together.
It seems to me that we ought to force the county commission to look at their comprehensive plan and decide which way we're going. We've got a lot of people in the north end that are upset about development that's going in, especially on septic and other concerns. So that's something that I think maybe we ought to revisit. I'm not going to vote for this today because I feel like we need to table this and come up with some answers.
Commissioner Goodwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First question, how many units are allowed under the current development order?
32.
Okay, so close to double.
Correct.
The units. And Mr. Camper, I understand this is not a development order stage, but we've kind of gotten into probably some of those type of issues. Do you think that the change from 32 to, and I don't know if 60 is the correct number, what they could get in there, but 60 lots, would that require a second look or an update to the stormwater management plan?
Certainly, if you put in 62 homes as opposed to 60 homes as opposed to 32, you're going to increase the amount of impervious surface. So you're going to have another look at the stormwater. So they have a development order for 32 units. They will need a new development order to get to the 62 they're looking for.
Okay. And then that would, and regardless of which way they go under the current development order, or if we if we approve a future land use map and zoning change and they change the development, that's going to be, like you said, an engineered stormwater plan that is permitted by DEP now, right?
Yes, as
And-
well as the county.
And then somebody will be a permittee responsible to the state for maintenance of that system. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, and that's something that's long-term, not just until I sell lots, right?
Correct. That stormwater system has to function throughout as long as the subdivision's there.
And does in your experience, I mean, will the state take enforcement action against somebody if they let those stormwater ponds fall out of compliance?
The state has in the past taken action when we've seen egregious instances. The county typically is on the front line of that. If somebody has a side of their pond blowout, typically code enforcement gets involved, county engineer gets involved, and the thing gets repaired.
Okay. With regard to this particular property, is it inside or outside the current urban development boundary?
I believe it is outside. Is it inside or? It's outside.
It's outside.
Mhm.
Okay. As would be probably some of the R1 that's adjacent to
Yes,
it.
we have our one outside the urban development boundary.
Okay. All right. And then with regard to the septic systems, of course, these are going to be current septic systems, current standards, if they put them in.
Correct.
Right. Do you know how far sewer services are from this property?
No, sir, I can't answer that off the top of my head.
Okay. All right. And I know we may not be in debate at this point yet because it's just asking questions, but I mean, I get the idea about desirability of not putting housing on septic when you can avoid it, but I think then that becomes, incumbent upon the utility providers, of which we're one of them, to get the darn lines out there, which we're working on in several places, but we don't have it everywhere. And I'm not saying it's this board. I mean, this is a problem that's decades old. Trying to figure out how far do you expand it and anticipating growth and those sorts of things. So I'm not sure if we didn't put a line out there, I'm not sure it's a great reason to tell somebody that, we don't think it's an appropriate place to have a subdivision. But at the same time, I mean, we do have to manage those, I guess, competing interests with adjacent landowners. One last question. If we make these changes and say, that you're faced with a new development order application for a subdivision with higher density, like 60 units. Are there any tools available to staff to talk about buffering or things like that to protect adjacent properties? Because you are going from, you would be conceivably going from rural residential to a much more intense R1. Are there any tools available?
Well, in the case of where we're looking at, the intensification would be to go to the same thing that the property owners on the west already have, which is R1. And it would be more intense than what the property owners on the north and the corner on the northeast have. And then on the east side is predominantly mixed use already, which allows, for commercial, et cetera. So it would be on the northern boundary there is where it would represent intensification. Although certainly right now, even the people on the west, they're looking at up to 2 units per acre as opposed to 4 units per acre right now. And as far as buffering is concerned, basically the buffers that we have in our comprehensive plan or referenced in the plan, then implemented through the LEC, basically are intended to provide, some step down in distancing between more intense uses. For example, low density residential to low density residential would not require a buffer because it's the same thing. You start getting buffers as the uses get more intense.
Right. So yeah, and specifically, I'm thinking about where the property abuts other rural residential. Obviously, the mixed use is already designed to be a transitional zoning, I think.
It's intended to be very flexible zoning.
Certainly, it's not, wouldn't be called less intense than R1.
Correct.
And then you've got R1. So I really, my question is, where this abuts rural residential, are there tools available to staff at the DO step?
At the DO step, they could annotate the site plan to show buffer put in along where it abuts on the RR.
Is that something that staff can negotiate, or is it only if it's brought by the applicant?
like most conditional zonings, if it's brought by the applicant. And Randy's pulling up the buffer code. Yeah, they're already showing a buffer in their subdivision plan along the north end. Right where it abuts the, and where it abuts the R on that little northeast corner.
And I don't, the gentleman that spoke, I'm assuming he's in the other RR district. I don't know where his property is. I don't know if you know.
No, I just got the call this morning. I've been
Okay.
trying to find out.
I mean, I would conceivably, he's not in the already zoned R1 himself, but. All right, so it sounds like there's some buffering you would look, that at the DO level, you would be looking at that for technical compliance and being able to, at least from a technical compliance standpoint, make sure everything's in line with what we would want.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, that's the only questions I had. Thanks.
Mr. Boyles?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess the first question would be, this is in your district, so before I make a motion, just gut check from you. Or do you not want to give a gut check and you just want me to make a motion?
I don't mind giving a gut check. I'll be in support of the changes. It has access right onto Highway 85. It has septic tanks, which the north end does currently utilize. There are 52 million or so reasons that the county is making an expansion, but that expansion starting on the east side of the county with the Shoal River Ranch. And one day it will be there. Hopefully that won't be too far away, but we do not operate water services there. That's Auburn Water. They do not offer sewer. And so I don't see that area in the near future having sewer capabilities. I do see this as a private parcel that's been underway for development for years. I think it would be good to have something built there because then there are some controls in place when it is developed. I think being right on 85 takes away a lot of the reasoning that's been used in the past because that is one of the better roadways with infrastructure that we have. So yes, I will be in support of it. Thank you for asking.
I'll move approval of the recommended flume changes to low density residential. And if there's a second, then some discussion, please.
Okay. All right, it dies for lack of second. Move to the next public hearing.
May I say something?
We're very pressed for time, but we can ask.
I know, but this is.
Can't do this twice.
Hang on, hang on.
Let's at least take a vote. I mean,
Well,
this is the
Mr.
second
Chairman,
time
you
you've
wanna
done this to me.
take
Mr. Steiner, we'll talk to you in a moment when it's time.
Hang on.
Right now is not the time.
Mr. Chairman, if you're not ready to call it, I'll second it for discussion unless you were about to.
No, I'm not. I'm going to vote against it, but I want to say a few words about this. It's important.
You've spoken to it multiple times. Is there
Well, it's
more that
important
feels
that
important?
people, in order to, when you put, first of all, we've got to examine our comprehensive plan because we're all going against it. Maybe we don't know we are, but we are. Secondly, if you want to do a sewer hookup someday down the road and you've got septic, it's $15,000. Who can afford that? So, and you have to really think about it. So maybe we need to revisit our comprehensive plan and decide what we want. But I think water sewer should lead development. I'm just saying. Need to say.
Commissioner Boyles?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Ketchel, we're not at odds on this issue. I think there's a couple of really important foundational things to talk through, though. Number one is we are actively underway with that review of the comprehensive plan that you're talking about. Now, I advocated for several years up here for a full, complete, and robust review of our comprehensive plan, top down, and we didn't get there. So we settled for a North End planning study, which is really making some good strides, has tremendous buy-in, lots of input. That's a process that has to work itself out. I won't be up here to take final action to approve some of those changes, but I do think some of those changes will be positive and they will wrestle with some of these issues that we're dealing with here and talking about today. While that process unfolds, though, we have to be really careful as policymakers and decision makers not to just do nothing. We don't have that luxury, and quite frankly, property owners expect more out of us at the end of the day. I think that we need to remember that, we tend to want to tread very lightly on people's rights to do as they wish with their property. And unfortunately, that can be somewhat of a painful two-way streets at times for neighbors who are looking across the fence going, I don't like what the guy next door is doing. That's the trade-off we make for choosing to operate in a system that prioritizes or respects individual rights and individual property rights. The chairman makes a really good point. This property, and Mr. Camper, I think point of clarification here, the report and my my memory of the location in the urban development boundary puts this property inside it. Your report says that it is inside the urban development boundary. So if we can get some clarification on that.
Okay, Randy, no, it is
It
inside.
is. And so I think that's that's corrective to what was said earlier,
Corrective to
in
what was
defense
said,
of my
yes.
fellow commissioners' position that may have taken on this issue initially. This is inside the urban development boundary. What that says is that folks before us who placed that boundary concluded that this was an area that was likely to urbanize and develop. And so if you've lived there for 45 years, I completely understand the frustration that you would have by that changing landscape around you that you ultimately don't have control over. I 100% get that. But this property is inside that boundary. We've all agreed that it is likely to be a part of our community or an area in our community that is going to grow, is going to densify. And it is on a primary highway corridor, so it has direct connectivity. So you're not putting it through a traditional residential neighborhood. And at the end of the day, we have to recognize the tension between density and sprawl. And so we're a community that people want to come to. We can love that, we can hate it, but it's the reality. You will not slow the flow of folks here by not building at density in the places where it's appropriate to do so. All you'll do is it just takes quite twice the property, and the developers are ready, willing, and able to just go buy the extra acreage and put in the lots at double the size. But all you're going to do is intensify that sprawl. And unless I've misread something and my planning fundamentals are badly skewed, that is the worst way to do it at the end of the day. And so do I love the fact that these may be on septic tanks? No, but we do have to wrestle with the fact that if we don't grant this change, where it is, in my opinion, about if you were going to grant this type of amendment request, this one is about spot on to be subject to getting that request as any property could be. We're just going to push the issue outward and at the end of the day start affecting communities like Baker and affecting communities like, the rural areas outside of Laurel Hill. And that's exactly, I think, what we're trying to avoid at the end of the day. But to do that, it does require some tough decisions. And it's, as I've said up here before, somebody's ox is going to get gored at the end of the day. And so we can vote against this thing. One, I think probably technically it would be unsound on the land, on the zoning map change. I think the saving grace there is probably the fact that it's a comp plan, which was going to give us more discretion. But at the end of the day, I don't think that is following sound policy for the policy that is in place today. And so listen, I don't love it, but I think it's within the right to ask. It's right within the sweet spot to approve. We need to go through the process that we're going through to make the changes that we think are appropriate to guide growth in the future, but that's not quite where we're sitting today. So I'll vote in support.
Mr. Goodwin?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just say, I am going to vote in support of it. When I look at this, I just want to point out a couple things. One, the way the map looks currently with the rural residential jutting down in between mixed use and R1 for a significant portion just looks strange and not really well thought out. And the reason for that is probably less about making odd juts of rural residential. It's probably because the property to the west was something else before and it changed to low density residential. That's my guess. I don't know. I didn't do a history research project on it, but I'm guessing that's probably how it happened. But now you ended up with this. So, I mean, honestly, there's probably an argument that could be had that the property would be equally suitable for mixed use because it shares a common border with a significant amount of mixed use and has direct access to Highway 85. But I think that would be much more detrimental to the rural residential that's to the north. Because then they could end up with a Walmart and, or whatever else, the auto repair shop, whatever you could put in mixed use. I'm maybe getting some of them wrong, but definitely commercial type intense uses that would significantly change the character of the property more than single family houses, which I think is what you'll get with this R1. So I think it makes sense. Look, could you, make an argument that most of it should be R1, but there's a portion of it that's probably ought to stay rural residential, the part that juts up a little bit north of that boundary where the mixed use is, maybe. But it's the parcel they own. Cutting up the map like that isn't the best thing to do. I think, however, even though I'm voting in support of this, I think it's been good discussion. Despite if any applicants or applicant representatives got a little, nervous about the way the discussion was going, I think it's a productive discussion the board's having. And I also think it sends a message that the board isn't just handing out future land use map and zoning changes just because they're presented, that, they're going to be considered and we'll have debate on them and deliberation. And in this case, it probably makes sense to be R1. And so I'm going to vote in support of it. But, that's not to say I'm just a rubber stamp for development. It's not that. It's, I think it's facts and circumstances and, specific. And in this case, that's what I think carries the day for me. So anyway, thank you.
Commissioner Ponder?
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate that. Yeah, I've been sitting here contemplating the map, looking at it and taking the wisdom of my fellow commissioners up here. Kind of stuck between that spot. It is a little bit of an enclave there, and it could really go, you can make the argument either way if they were to change it just to line things up. And if I read the write-up correctly, I mean, if the new owner of the land wanted to, they could actually put more units on that parcel if we did agree to it, versus the 60. I know it was approved for 32 before, and it could do 2 before, which is like 40 something. So I don't see them bumping it up too much. And if it went to mixed use, it could be a commercial unit, or it could be up to 25 units per acre. So therefore, it actually could be very intrusive on the neighborhood or the development to the west. And so with that in mind, I'll support the motion of going 40 with the 60 units as opposed to the 80, which they could have done if assuming it passes, and with the adaptability to the neighboring.
It is 62 units,
So
Commissioner.
instead of 6, so it's 2 additional. Okay, then I read it wrong then. Okay, no problem. Okay, thank you, but I will support the motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed? 4-1.
Mr. Chairman, move approval of the zoning map change from RR and MU to R1.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman, and just note that I think at the zoning point, if the current RR doesn't meet the LDR flume, we actually have no choice but to rezone it, don't we?
Otherwise, override.
Right, otherwise we'd be in violation. I think maybe a state law that requires us to conform our zoning map to our future land use map. So anyway, just thought I'd point that.
Right. 2 separate motions. Do we have any further discussion? All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 4-1. Mr. Camper, don't go far. We're going to do these couple more.
Yes, sir.
Potential public hearings. The next public hearing is for transmittal of a comp plan text amendment, amending the comp plan pertaining to mobility. Mr. Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is, as the chairman has said, this is for transmittal. You're not being asked to adopt anything at this hearing today. As you know, for some time, the county has been working with a consultant to look at how it addresses the road system. Right now, we have a more or less traditional concurrency-based system that utilizes proportionate share payments to address long-term level of service concerns. What the proposed amendments in front of you would do would be to amend the comprehensive plan text in several of the chapters in order to enable us to move to a mobility system that allows Public Works Department, when it's assessing development proposals, to be a little more flexible and also to provide for a different emphasis, which is on the safe movement of people and vehicles as opposed to strict traffic counts. Traffic counts would still be looked at when it comes time to look at a development proposal for things like how the site is to be accessed, and for long-range capital improvements programming, just to look at the sheer carrying capacity of a road. But on the day-to-day, it gets rid of the segment by segment approach that's been typically used and replaces it with a mobility scheme. I would enter the rest of the staff report into the record unless anybody has some specific questions. And Mr. Bitterman is here, who has been probably the prime mover of the mobility system and working closely with our consultant along with Mr. Woodruff, if you have any real nitty-gritty questions you want to ask.
Thank you for the presentation. Open the floor for public comment if there is any. Seeing none, this time we'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion for approval.
Motion by Commissioner Ketchel. A second by Commissioner Ponder. Thank you. Any discussion? Commissioner Goodwin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just to be clear, Elliot, so this would only be for transmittal. In other words, before adopting it, it would come back to this board.
Yes, sir. Comes
Okay.
back for second hearing.
So, and I'll just go on the record right now saying, Elliot, you and I have got to sit down and go over it because there's a whole heck of a lot attached there. And it's going to go for the next one too. So we're just doing transmittal.
That's
But
correct.
before we adopt it, you and I need to sit down. I need to be able to digest this because this is would be a pretty substantial change from the way we currently do traffic concurrency. So
Can I invite Scott to the meeting too?
absolutely.
Okay.
So you're volunteered, but I won't ask those questions right now. So thanks.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. The next public hearing is for transmittal of a comp plan text amendment, amending the comp plan pertaining to the EAR. Mr. Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Just about a year ago in September, the county basically approved its evaluation appraisal of the comprehensive plan. And for those of you who've seen them in the old days and people in the audience, if your comprehensive plan was this thick, your evaluation appraisal report was about that thick. The state did away with that in 2011, and they basically said that the counties had to evaluate whether or not that their comprehensive plan had kept pace with statutory revisions over time, and also as a relatively recent requirement that provided for a 10-year planning horizon. Our comprehensive plan has kept pace with the statutory changes. However, it did not have a 10-year planning timeline, which is, what was stated to the board, to the state just about a year ago in the affidavit letter that went to them. Since that time, the county has been working on establishing the 10-year planning horizon, which is the substance of the rather thick attachment you have, which consists primarily of the planning profiles. This is a section or area by area look based on zip codes, actually, that looks at the road network, the water, the sewer, the population, the land use allocations within the various areas of the county that forms the basis of data and analysis. And looking at that and then tying it back to a 10-year horizon of improvements, which is also included in the table throughout here. In order to make this happen, we are amending the capital improvements element to include that schedule, and also asking the Board of County Commissioners to transmit this to the state to utilize the planning profiles as the basis of the 10-year planning horizon. And you'll see more about the planning profiles in the North County Planning Study, which is in fact taking kind of the deep dive into the comp plan that used to be the substance of evaluation appraisal reports prior to 2011. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Is anyone from the public desiring to speak on this item? This time we'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, would anyone like to make a motion? Motion by Commissioner Boyles. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Second by Commissioner Ponder. Any further discussion? All in favor, signify with aye. Any opposed? It passes unanimously. The last public hearing is to consider adoption of the fiscal year 2024 capital improvements update ordinance. Mr. Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, this is kind of a housekeeping matter. The state does require us to every year annually amend our capital improvements program in the comprehensive plan to show what our 10-year schedule of capital improvements is. Working with Okaloosa County Water and Sewer and the Public Works Department, we have put together a schedule of capital improvements, which is included as an attachment that shows what those improvements are going to be. This is, even though it is a text amendment, back in the day when you can only do text amendments twice a year, it was exempt from that cycle. This is a matter of housekeeping. It's a one and done by the Board of County Commissioners. This is simply adopting the capital improvements program that's attached, and that can be amended by this board at any time. Just have to adopt another ordinance.
Thank you. Does anyone from the public desire to speak to this item? This time we'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, would anyone like to make a motion to approve or disapprove?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Boyles, a second by Commissioner Ketchel. Any further discussion? All in favor signify with aye.
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 Thank you all very much.
Thank you. We'll be taking a 5-minute break. We'll come back for the budget hearing, and then we'll finish out the commission meeting after that.
Yeah. You know what? Did they vote, yeah, to let the subdivision in? Yes, sir. Tell you what.
Oh,
Yeah, it did.
yes.
All right, we'll begin the public hearing for the budget agenda on Tuesday, September 3rd, 5:01 PM. Meeting of the Okaloosa County Board of Commissioners. Mr. Hofstad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In light of the hour and given the fact that we have to get to another agenda, I'm going to do my best to get through this required language in this budget hearing, and I'll need three motions out of this board. I'll need one to accept the countywide millage rate, and a separate motion to accept the MS2 millage rate, and then a last motion to accept the tentative budget. Just some legal requirements I need to read into the record. This budget contemplates holding the line on the county property tax millage at 3.8308 mils. That exceeds the rollback rate of 3.6324 mils by 5.02%. So a small percentage over the rollback rate. The unincorporated MSTU millage, that's the millage that we use to fund both the stormwater program and our county unincorporated parks. Holding the line on that millage, which I believe this is the 11th consecutive year that we've held the line on that millage at 0.299 mils. That exceeds the rollback rate of 0.285 mils by 4.91%. And then collectively combining those two creates your aggregate millage rate. The aggregate millage rate, again, holding the line on that millage rate for, I believe now it's, I think the 8th consecutive year at 3.9671 mils. That exceeds a rollback rate of 3.7683 mils by 5.28%. Just a few statements to read into the record. Again, this budget does not contemplate a property tax rate increase, millage increase. Property values as certified are increasing by about 7.5%, with ad valorem revenue increasing by 7.3 million. As you know, you use your ad valorem revenue to fund a variety of operations, both general fund departments within the BCC, and then the aid and support that we provide for the constitutional offices, namely the Sheriff's Department and SOE, are fully funded with property tax revenue, and then partial funding to the other agencies. Total of 46 new positions were approved throughout all of the budget workshops that we held back in July. 21 of those are in the general funds, 16 in special revenue funds, 10 in the enterprise funds, and we also had a reduction of one position in fleet operations. Employee benefits do include a 4% cost of living increase. This board has taken on quite a bit of lifting in the last several budget cycles to try and right-size our wages. And you've given me a lot of flexibility as your county administrator to make internal adjustments so we could offer a competitive wage. And I think we're doing much better in that regard now than we were a few years ago when we were absolutely hemorrhaging various positions. There are also no planned increases in our health insurance costs. Kelly and the work she does with HR and risk and our brokerage firm holding the line on those healthcare increases has been a phenomenal job that they've done here in the last few budget cycles. We'll see a nominal increase in dental insurance, a very minimal increase in our dental insurance for those that opt to take advantage of the dental insurance. This budget, when we presented it to you back in July as part of our workshops, we had estimated our revenue at $645,752,980. From the time that we go through our workshops to the time that we get into these public hearings, typically DORs revise and set the numbers for revenue estimates for the state going forward. So it does typically result in a modification to this final amount. So the final amount that's before you when you approve the tentative budget later on in this meeting is $648,334,971. That is a huge budget, but it takes a large budget to run a county of 1,000 square miles, multifaceted operations that we provide here in Okaloosa County, ranging from, operations as small as veteran services to operations as large as public works. And it takes a lot of money to run those various departments and to provide the funding necessary for our constitutional offices. Not all of that, as you know, is property tax money. A lot of that is special revenues, your state sales tax, your state revenue sharing, your enterprise fund revenues, gas taxes. A lot of that funding is what makes up this total all-in budget of 648 million. This is just a breakdown of some of the changes we made. We had a decrease in DOR funding in the grand scheme of things. I mean, it's $3.6 million, but when you look at all that funding combined, had very little impact on the budget that was presented to you in July versus the budget you have before you now. Just touching very briefly again on the county property tax millage. We estimated collections last year at 103 million. This year, we're estimating collections at 111 million. You'll see a difference in the two figures between the Avalorem total and the Avalorem budgeted revenue, and that's because we have a very conservative revenue collection percentage of 95%. So we do not budget full collection of property taxes. We budget 95% collection of property taxes, and typically we always exceed that. Our finance staff says that we typically are around 98% that we collect, but we do, for budgetary purposes, we budget at 95%. Avalorem tax revenue distribution, you'll see the percentage change in your general fund collection, again, from the budgeted collection of property tax revenues. We budgeted 93 million, almost 94 million last year. We're looking at a little over 100 million in collections this year. That's an increase of 6.9 million, or about a 7.4% change. That funding source is used to fund a lot of different operations, as I alluded to earlier. Part of that, we have a statutory responsibility to fund a portion of the county health department budget. There is a very nominal increase in that budget, 0.15% increase, going from 656,000 to 657,000. Capital outlay, this is the portion of our capital outlay that we fund with our general fund dollars. You'll see last year we budgeted 3.6 million roughly, and this year we're budgeting a little over 3.9 million in capital outlay projects. That represents an increase of 368 million, or about 10%. And then again, on the bottom line, you see the total budget, again, that is spread through a number of different areas throughout your BCC general fund departments and your constitutional offices. MSTU millage, I won't speak to this any more than to say we're holding the line, and I think this is the 11th year we've held the line at 0.299 mils. That estimated total collection at 95% is about 3.7, a little over $3.7 million to fund portions of our stormwater program and our county unincorporated parks. General fund cost drivers, personnel continues to be our number one cost. We're a service organization, and it takes people to get the job done. That's where the bulk of our revenue goes. And the general fund is to support the personnel costs and those support costs inside of our personnel and O&M. Operating costs, the slight increase in that from 27 million to 28 million, as I told this board last year. We continue to see some rise in costs, but I will say encouragingly, we've seen some stabilization in these cost increases, so it's not as much as we had to adjust our budget last year for operating costs and some of our capital costs or capital projects. So that is encouraging, seeing that trend going forward. Also inside your general fund, you do have a set aside for community redevelopment agencies, and we have several municipalities that have CRAs. I believe Fort Walton has 2. I think Destin has 2. I think there's a couple inside. Crestview and Niceville has 1 as well. What this does is it sets aside the increase in value on those property tax collections that we remit back to those municipalities for use inside those CRA districts. A slight increase in the library cooperative payments. These are the payouts to the participating libraries inside the county's library cooperative. The aid to the others, we had this discussion earlier as far as our nonprofits. We will adjust that figure. I think it's actually, Sheila, 280,000 roughly. So we'll have a little bit of adjustment. Won't overall impact the budget at all, but we will adjust that in the final presentation before you in 2 weeks. And then the contribution to the constitutionals, you'll see that's 77 million of that roughly 130 million that we have coming in those funding sources. Property valuations for the last 10 years, this trend continues with these property valuations. That's why we're able to accomplish a lot of what we've been able to accomplish here in this county for the last several budget cycles and not have to increase that millage burden to our residents. Went too fast. This ad valorem collections and rate history. This gives you an idea of the millage assessment compared to the revenues that we have coming in and those collections each year. So you see that trend kind of follows that 10-year trend with the property valuations as well. MSTU collections and rate history, much like the previous slide, this shows where we've held the line on that 0.299 mils for MSTU and what that millage generates in support of those two functions. This slide is a slide we like to provide to the board. We've done so for the last several years in our budget cycles, and this gives you an idea of what we assess by our property tax millage, our aggregate millage, and where we stack up against our neighboring counties and those counties in the state that we benchmark against. We always include Monroe County in here. That's Florida Keys. Although we're much larger in size than the Florida Keys, they've been able to hold the line and in some cases reduce some millage in the Keys because the value of real estate in the Keys is so drastically higher than everywhere else in the state. And so they don't necessarily have the broad range of services that we have here in Okaloosa County. So they're able to spread those dollars much further within their county organization. But we include them. And then, like I said, some of our neighboring counties. Just very briefly, some of our accomplishments. The artificial reef program continues to be robust, and Alex does a great job with that. The Okaloosa Island Water Booster Station, the water and sewer has taken on a tremendous amount of projects in the last few years. Wanted to highlight that project. Some of what we're doing inside Public Works with the Bob White stormwater improvements would not have been able to take that project on and many projects that Jason's able to accomplish without that local option surtax that our voters approved in 2018. So we wanted to highlight that. Tracy and the update of the 40-year-old minimum standards and rules. That was a lot of work over several months getting that done, and we were fortunate that we were able to get that done. PJ Adams, finally seeing that roadway open up from State Road 85 to Crabapple. And the DOT contracts continues to advance, so we look forward to completing that project out here in the coming couple of years. Completed design for many other projects that are under construction, scheduled for construction. Again, a lot of that attributable to the local option surtax. And then we received word from FTA that we are considered a large urbanized area, and that allows for additional funding in support of transit. So we wanted to highlight that. 2025 plans, continued growth at the airport and what Tracy's been able to accomplish there with the federal funding sources that we have coming in, plus their local revenues to apply towards advancing some of these projects. So that east and west baggage claim expansion, looking forward to that next year. Again, multiple surtax projects that just would not have been would not be able to accomplish without that funding source. So that funding source has been a boon to us as it relates to major capital improvements. Bridge to Bridge multi-use path it's underway, and we'll look forward to getting that project complete. Same thing with Veterans Park Phase 2 and the Highway 98 Living Shoreline projects. We'll see those projects kick off here in the coming months. Shell River Ranch wastewater plant. I think you saw from our water and sewer folks that we finally secured all the funding to get that project built. that will be the catalyst for some of the development we hope to see out at Shoal River Ranch and some residential development out in that area of the county. New public works facility, a new transfer station. We hope to begin construction on that as we identify funding sources moving forward into the new year. And then some of the work water and sewer is doing with the Highway 90 water main replacements and the I-10 utility relocates. So again, going back to the discussion this board had just briefly an hour or so ago about expanding our water and sewer capacity to meet our growth needs here in the county. And then continued cooperation with JD and the clerk's office on the new ERP system. So we hope to get that moving next year. That does it for my presentation, Mr. Chairman. We will close this budget out on the 17th with our final budget hearing, and that is scheduled for the County Administration Building there in Shalimar, 501 on September 17th. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I will do my best to address any questions the board may have.
Sure. Any questions before we move to public comment? And anyone from the public desiring to speak to this item have no speaker cards. But if you are, just indicate and you can speak. All right, seeing none, we'll move to the first action item, the tentative countywide millage rate resolution. Motion by Commissioner Ponder, second by Commissioner Ketchel. Any further discussion? All in favor signify with aye. Aye. Passes unanimously. Next item is the tentative MSTU millage rate resolution.
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Ketchel, Commissioner Ponder. Any further discussion? All in favor signify with aye. It passes unanimously. And lastly is the tentative budget resolution.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Boyles, second by Commissioner Ketchel. Any further discussion? All in favor signify with aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. This time we'll open for an additional public comment if there's any desire to speak. All right. Seeing none, we'll adjourn the hearing. We'll go immediately back into the commission meeting. We'll begin at department business. Mr. Autry.
Good evening. I'm going to try and incorporate the new word basical into this, but I'm not sure that I can do it. So we'll see. It's for you.
You really just
I
do
did.
that to him?
I did. It was he earned it. He asked for it. There is one item that Public Works has for consideration. This is a follow-on on an agreement that we have with the Fikes Wholesale Company. They're developing a parcel at the corner of Old Bethel Road and Highway 90. This is an agreement we had in place. If you recall, there was right of way. This says to be vacated. We've actually performed that step, and this is the dedication of the right of way along the front of the parcel for future widening of Old Bethel Road as part of our Northwest Crestview bypass. I do want to point out there are some conditions to the use of this land because of timing and such. The development that will go in there, which is intended to be a convenience store, will utilize the area for its the septic system, its drain field, until such time as sewer service is available. As part of this, the county will take care of the reimbursement costs for that. It's actually an advantage because long-term, if they were to not dedicate this right of way and we were to take this or to get it through some sort of process in the future, we would pay for that conversion anyhow. It just makes it so that we actually have some control of the land. They will also use the area as part of their landscape buffer and for turn lanes as they construct as part of the development, which again, in long term, we would make those concessions anyhow. We certainly do appreciate the cooperation from Fikes Wholesale Inc. on this effort, as this gives us right of way to accommodate the current intersection, future intersection, and then long-term intersection with Old Bethel Road and Highway 90. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Mr. Chairman, no questions. Well, one comment, and I didn't want to do this, but in defense of my dear friend, Pat Maddox, I do have to note that the words recoup and recuperate, not interchangeable. Move approval, Mr. Chairman.
Did I say that? Damn.
We have a motion by Commissioner Boyles.
I'll take it.
With comment, derogatory or not. A second by Commissioner Ponder.
I'm going to miss him.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
It passes unanimously.
I thank you for it all.
We have removed the next item, and so we'll be going straight to Ms. Byrd.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Paid time off or PTO has been on the radar for some time. The current BCC leave program is comprised of annual and sick leave. There is currently no cap on the accrual. At the time of separation, an employee is eligible to be paid out up to 240 hours of annual leave. An employee must have at least 10 years of service with the board to be eligible for a sick leave payout, which is tiered. In an effort to reduce long-term liability to the county, the board directed staff to bring back recommendations on transitioning to a PTO system. A PTO focus group comprised of department directors, managers, and other key financial employees within the county met multiple times and spent a great deal of thought coming up with this, keeping in mind their employees and how it affected them. Our county administrator, after that, has provided details of options that are being brought to the board today to those directors to share with employees, especially those with large balances. I'm going to give you a quick overview of the PTO program, how it would be structured, and then the two options. Employees will accrue leave consistent with the updated PTO accrual schedule, and I apologize that I didn't put the old schedule next to that, but the main differences is that for less than 2 years of employment and greater than 16, those accruals are slightly less. PTO leave may be used as you accrue it. Right now, annual leave cannot be used during your probationary period. Floating holiday, which is really a longevity bonus after you've been here 5 years of 10 hours, it's use it or lose it. We would propose to keep that. There will be a cap on the amount that you can accrue, that you cannot accrue more than 960 hours. When you separate, unused PTO leave of 480 hours would be paid out to an employee upon separation, regardless of your years of service, provided that you successfully completed your probationary period. And our employees enjoy a sick leave buyback in November. It's up to 24 hours that they can sell back to the county. It's tied to the amount of sick leave they use. We would propose that an employee with at least 240 hours of PTO would be able to participate in that and sell up to 24 hours back annually. There were two recommendations. The first recommendation is if the board wished to entertain a grandfather option. And let me start with saying that 75% of our employees have less than 480 hours on the books. So those employees would automatically transition to a PTO system. For the employees, 25% that have more than 480 hours of combined sick and annual leave, regardless of service, would be allowed to grandfather in, be exempt from the PTO system, and it would be on the system that we currently have with the rules in the HR book pertaining to that leave, while the other employees would be on a PTO system. There would be a voluntary opt-in, and that's outlined in your packet. I'm going to get more into the immediate transition because it's a little more complicated. But should the board elect to go ahead and have employees immediately transition to the PTO system of leave, this is the way that it would work. A PTO bank consisting of 480 hours would be built drawing first from the annual leave balance of the employee. In the event that the annual leave balance is less than 480, the additional hours to make 480 would be pulled from the sick leave pool. Their sick leave balance. After hours are deducted, the balance of the sick leave bank would be paid out consistent with the current sick leave payout provisions, regardless of years of service. 50% for the first 480, 25% for the next 480, and 20% of all hours over 960. Any remaining annual leave hours will be paid out at 50%. There are approximately 92 employees who would have those excess annual leave hours. This rate of pay would be based on the employee's hourly rate of pay at the end of September, not on the rate after the COLA. The cost for option one, the grandfathering option, and that is assuming that everybody opted in, would be $1.9 million. Should the board opt for an immediate transition to PTO, we estimate an additional $582,000. This is just a little over $1 million impact to the general fund. So I presented the options, and we look for your direction.
Thank you, Ms. Bird. Commissioners? Commissioner Goodwin.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is something I think that, has been needed to be looked at for quite some time, and I appreciate the effort that you and your staff have gone through in looking at it. And, you know, just, I appreciate the time we got to sit down and look at it. It sounds to me like, you know, through the options, and I don't know if it's appropriate at this point, but I'll just say, I'm much more in favor of you managing one system, a PTO system, because I'm concerned about the administrative, you know, additional administrative complexity of managing two systems within the same organization. I think it could lead to problems. However, transitioning to a pure PTO system, where you're, you know, having to buy out those accrued benefits, you know, yeah, it's going to be expensive, but I think if we're ever going to do it, now is the time to do it. And so, yeah, and I guess I'll, you know, maybe I'm trying to make my case before I make my motion, but you know, to me, if we weren't, if your recommendation on what, I guess, would that be option 3, just a pure go ahead and transition over everyone?
Option 2.
Option 2.
The committee came up with the 2 options, if, you know, depending on the way the board was leaning, a grandfathering option and an option to transition all employees.
So the option to transition all employees, your option 2, again, if it didn't have a very fair value paid back for those accrued benefits, it would not be equitable and would not be palatable. But I think what it's doing, and I understand some employees may think long-term down the road, I had this in my plan, but what we would be doing if we adopt option 2 is giving them that money now. Obviously, you know, time value of money, it's current value of what that is. And then they get the opportunity to invest or do whatever they need with that money now. So basically, instead of waiting to the future, we're turning over more power to the employees to chart out their own future. And we're, you know, we'd be paying for that to transition. Number 2, I think PTO just makes more sense. We don't need to micromanage people and ask for a doctor's note and, hey, send me a text message proving you have a fever. Not that we do that, but we don't need to micromanage it. We employ, you know, good people who are all responsible adults, and, you know, because if they're not, they don't get to stay in this organization. So those people that are in this organization accruing those benefits, I think, can manage their time off, and they don't need your department or their directors and their managers managing it to that level of needing to know, well, you know, are you actually sick today or not? If you've got a personal item or a personal issue, I think, you know, it just makes sense to let the employees use that within their discretion. Again, it's us trusting them to manage their personal, you know, their personal needs. And I think they will well be able to do it. I know it's a little bit of rip the Band-Aid off approach, but we're going to pay for that. We're not going to take anything away from anybody that's been earned if we go with that route. So anyway, I'll make a motion that we go with option 2, make the transition. It's going to cost us, but now's the time to do it if we're gonna. So.
Thank you. Second. All right. Second by Commissioner Ponder. Any further discussion? All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously.
With this direction, Chairman, I'll be bringing back a policy that reflects that for the next meeting.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just very briefly, I just want to mention one of the things Kelly didn't mention, but I think is critical to this decision you're making tonight, is the fact that we carry a very large compensated absences liability on our books. I mean, to the tune of $5 million just for the BCC. This is a step the board has taken. You've given us direction 2 years ago. 2 things had to happen. We had to get through a pay and classification study. Then we had to build a bank to be able to do it. So this helps us not totally remove that compensated absences liability, but significantly cut into it, which is good for us long term. So certainly appreciate the board's leadership with this issue.
Ms. Byrd,
Ms. Byrd,
your second item? I'm sorry.
Second. Oh,
Your second item.
Oh, yes, I do have another item. Ooh. As part of the fiscal year BCC budget workshops, The board directed human resources staff to research the county administrator's salary in comparison with other counties in the state of Florida. Attached to the item, you'll find a comparison of counties of comparable size and population to Okaloosa County. In addition, an expanded review of other local executive salaries is included. Okaloosa County Administrator's salary is 16.34% below the average of the one document that has the counties with comparable populations and demographics.
Chairman,
Commissioner Ketchel.
I'd like to make a motion to increase the county administrator's salary, Mr. Hofstede's salary, to $212,000 inclusive of the October cost of living increase, the COLA. Hopefully I'll get a second.
I'll second.
Okay. Second by Commissioner Ponder. Any further discussion?
I'll support the motion. I do think maybe some kind of just clarification or, further commentary is helpful. So we, as we've gone through that kind of pay classification process, I think we've worked really hard internally, all through almost every ranks of our employees to make sure that we were competitive with our wages. And so I think probably the one piece that was missing from that was the kind of the senior executive level that was not really a part of that process. And so I do think it's can be a little bit of an uncomfortable thing, but it's a necessary thing to make sure we're taking a look at that. Quite frankly, I don't think John's going anywhere, best I can tell. But I do think that it is important to maintain a competitive position because he's not going to be the county administrator forever. And so I think in that light, it was certainly an effort worth undertaking. I was a bit surprised actually at where the numbers shook out. I know, Mr. Chairman, that you pushed on this. I think the bit of additional commentary that I would add is to make sure if we have, whether it's our deputy county administrators who are also working very hard and, making John look good most of the time, or some of our department heads that fell through that process. As I understand it, John's got that flexibility, and I suspect we'll be revisiting that issue as well in light of action taken today. Is that fair, Mr. Hofstede?
Absolutely. And, commissioners, I certainly remain humbled by your support, and you've been very supportive, and we are very fortunate in this county that we've got the leadership we have up on this board. You certainly make my job easier. You're advocates for our staff, and you always have been, and that does not go unappreciated. So I needed to say that. Thank you.
Chairman, I just would like to follow up by saying that, this was not something that I just picked up out of the air. I did an analysis with Ms. Bird of all of the salaries. But not only that, Mr. Hofstede is the consummate professional. Look at this budget he put together. It's been so easy to work with him. He makes us look good most times. So I thank you for the work that you've done on the budget. I thank you for the staff that you've put together. When I look back 10 years ago, where we are and where we are today, we've got tremendous professionals working at every level, at the highest level of our government. And I'm so grateful for that. And thank you for the way you've handled that.
Mr. Ponder.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. That's funny, Commissioner Ketchel. You mentioned you'd come up, so I had a range based on the analysis I ran. That was between 210 and 215. So when you hit 212, I'm like, well, you're right there. Kelly, thank you for your hard work on getting this done. And that took some time to comb through some counties around the state and get the figures. But I believe a worker is worthy of their wages. And when I think of what Mr. Hofstede has done in and through before COVID, through COVID, after COVID, the team that he's led, I think it's second to none. And I think we should give honor where honor is due and validate that by doing this for him. He's a treasured asset within Okaloosa County, has been from his days back to Fort Walton to here. And we're grateful for your leadership for our county. And I think it's well worth it that we honor you this way.
I'm not in favor of this because of the uniqueness of the study of other counties, but it does say a lot with the dynamics of Okaloosa County. So definitely in favor of this. Glad that we've had this initiative. Glad that we do have some comps to look at to see what other people are doing. But it does give us an opportunity to get in line, if you will, but to reward a job well done and what's expected of you. We're so supportive as a commission to your role. because of the job you do in that role. If you weren't doing that job, I don't believe we would be nearly as supportive as a commission, but you do a stellar work there as our department heads. And so thank you for the work that you do. Any additional comments? Commissioner Goodwin?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'll vote in support of it. I just did some quick math, John has to answer to 5 of us. So you divide that by 5, it's 42,400 to deal with me. Maybe that's fair. I don't know. You might need more out of others.
Would you like to name names? He doesn't need to. All in favor indicate with aye. Any opposed? It passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bird. This time we'll adjust on the agenda and move to public comments. Does anyone else from the public desire to speak? Lane Watkins. No, push the speak button. Push the speak button. It'll turn red. There you go.
Thank you. Still trying to recover from your discussion of the 60-acre subdivision on Highway 85. So I would urge you to please keep that discussion in mind, seriously. Because in a couple of months, you're going to be reviewing the Inspire's recommendations for the comprehensive growth plan. And you all touched on a lot of things that are hot potatoes, both with the comp plan as it exists, the lack of following the comp plan as it exists, and what's being discussed in terms of recommendations. I want to thank Commissioner Ketchel for being the voice, keeping issues like the septic alive, because that's important. So I recommend that the county adopt an online public report listing all approved development orders or subdivisions currently under development, so that county officials and the public can have a picture of what's happening in the county as a whole. I started to bring this up without this comment, but again, based on that discussion, I got to say it. We're talking about the destruction of the North County. If you want to consider rural or any aspect of the character of this North County, that's what we're talking about. What do I mean? So I took a quick unofficial look at what we know as developments. And when I say unofficial, I hear about new ones every day. I didn't even include Lake Silver subdivision in this. We've got over 2,200 dwelling units in work right now in this county, unincorporated rural North Okaloosa County. If you look at the Bieber average number, that's over 6,000 new residents. Your poor consultant Inspire only thinks we're going to get 4,800 new residents by 2035. Okay, so you're over 140% of that today. So I'm just asking you to get that awareness. We had citizens here today talking about, can you please look at cumulative type impacts on places like Buckward Road or Auburn Road? And we don't do that in our processes. So there's more subdivisions to come, and I haven't even been finished. Okay, the other thing, we've got a town hall coming up on parks. So let's look at what Inspire is telling us about our parks. Our comp plan identifies a level of service, and Inspire has pointed out that our current parks are at 10 times the comp plan level of service. I don't know how we got there. They also point out they have a list of proposed parks that are 20 times the comp plan level of service. So the question becomes that people are asking over and over, is anybody looking at the comp plan? So, all right, I'll wrap it up there. And the only other thing I wanted to mention was the mobility plan. Likewise, Inspire is working on a transportation element. I hope if the mobility plan is the new order, that somehow we reconcile that before we adopt their recommendations. That's what I have. Appreciate it.
Is there anyone else from the public desiring to speak? All right, with that, we'll move to the Commissioner's Minute. Commissioner Goodwin. Commissioner Ketchel.
I'd like to congratulate Drew Palmer sitting in the audience. I'd like to congratulate the chairman for getting reelected. And I don't see Sherry Cox here today. I think she's been suffering with a cold or something. So anyway, I'm glad for the new commissioners. Looking forward to working with all of you. So congratulations. It's hard to run an election. It's hard to lose an election. So, it'll be good to have you all up. Thank you.
Commissioner Ponder.
I was just going to congratulate Mr. Palmer for being here. He'll do outstanding things, and obviously Ms. Cox as well. And of course, Mr. Nixon, congratulations as well. Outstanding win for the county.
Commissioner Boyles.
I was just going to congratulate myself on not running and get out of here, but anyways. Thank you, Reggie. Amen, brother. That's all.
Oh, I have nothing. Meeting's adjourned.